the Zeigarnik Shift. You've likely felt it before, that nagging sensation when something remains unfinished, an invisible force tugging your mind back to a task until you finally complete it. This intriguing psychological phenomenon is known as the Zeigarnik Shift, a subtle yet powerful trick your brain plays compelling you toward closure whenever there's an unresolved matter lingering in your thoughts. It was in the bustling cafes of 1920s Vienna where psychologist Bluma Zeigarnik first stumbled upon this peculiar effect. While observing waiters handling numerous complex orders, Zeigarnik noticed something fascinating. These waiters, relying entirely on memory, flawlessly remembered each detail of their customers' requests. Yet, remarkably, as soon as the bills were paid and the orders completed, their recollection faded almost immediately. Intrigued, Zeigarnik dove deeper, confirming through experiments that incomplete tasks linger vividly in our memories, while completed tasks fade into the background almost instantly. But why does this happen? Our minds are inherently wired to seek closure. When you start something, no matter how small, your subconscious sees it as an open loop, creating an intense psychological drive to finish the job. This is precisely why incomplete projects seem to haunt your thoughts, causing restlessness, anxiety, or even obsession until they're resolved. Let's say you have a report that's been looming over you for days. Just thinking about it feels daunting, and getting started seems impossible. But here's where the Zeigarnik Shift comes to your aid. Instead of tackling the entire report head-on, you commit to simply opening your laptop and writing the first sentence. The moment you begin, your brain registers the task as unfinished business. Even if you walk away after just a few words, your subconscious mind continues churning, constantly nudging you back toward completing the report. Soon enough, you feel a compelling urge to return and finish what you've started. This clever mental trick has far-reaching implications beyond productivity. Media and entertainment industries skillfully exploit the Zeigarnik Shift to keep audiences hooked. Television producers and novelists often end episodes and chapters at the peak of suspense, leaving stories intentionally incomplete. This lack of closure keeps viewers and readers thinking about the narrative obsessively, eager for the next installment. Advertisers employ the same principle, posing unanswered questions or scenarios that linger in your mind, compelling you to seek resolution through action. Interestingly, understanding and leveraging the Zeigarnik Shift can fundamentally transform your mindset toward tasks you typically dread or avoid. Procrastination, for instance, loses much of its power once you realize that even minimal action can ignite a compelling internal drive toward completion. Simply starting becomes the hardest part, yet also the most transformative step you can take. Consider another real-world scenario. You're struggling to maintain a consistent workout routine. Instead of promising yourself a lengthy session each day, you commit only to stepping into the gym or putting on your workout clothes. Once this tiny action occurs, the Zeigarnik Shift kicks in. Your mind, recognizing this as unfinished, pushes you to complete the activity. Before you realize it, you're midway through your workout, driven by the mental momentum you've effortlessly created. The beauty of the Zeigarnik Shift lies in its subtlety and ease of application. Recognizing your brain's powerful need for closure allows you to strategically harness this phenomenon, transforming challenges into simple starting points. Whether you're striving for greater productivity, increased motivation, or simply to conquer procrastination, this psychological insight provides an elegant path forward. By initiating even the smallest step, you set the stage for your mind's unstoppable pursuit of completion. Paradoxical intention. Have you ever tried desperately to fall asleep, only to find yourself staring at the ceiling, becoming increasingly awake with every passing minute? Or perhaps you've experienced the anxiety of speaking in public, your hands trembling as you remind yourself repeatedly not to mess up. Ironically, the harder you attempt to force calmness, sleep, or confidence, the more elusive they become. This frustrating cycle has a counterintuitive solution. It's called paradoxical intention. Paradoxical intention is a psychological technique pioneered by renowned psychiatrist Viktor Frankl, designed to reverse anxiety and stress by deliberately attempting to induce the very outcome you fear. It sounds contradictory, even absurd, but the brilliance of this approach lies precisely in its paradoxical nature. Here's how it works. When you desperately try to prevent something unpleasant from happening, your anxiety magnifies, triggering a self-fulfilling prophecy. The harder you try to avoid failure, embarrassment, or insomnia, the more your mind focuses obsessively on the feared outcome, increasing the likelihood that it will occur. Paradoxical intention flips this psychological trap on its head. By intentionally welcoming or exaggerating the feared event, your anxiety loses its power, simply because you're no longer resisting it. Imagine this scenario. You're terrified of blushing in social situations, a fear that consistently causes your cheeks to flush at precisely the worst moments. Applying paradoxical intention, instead of repeatedly telling yourself, "Don't blush," you purposefully encourage yourself to blush as deeply and embarrassingly as possible the next time you speak with others. You may even think, "Let's see how red my face can become. Let's really make this noticeable." Strangely enough, the mere act of inviting your fear drastically reduces your anxiety, disrupting the cycle. Suddenly, blushing feels less threatening, less humiliating, and ironically, you're far less likely to blush at all. Why is paradoxical intention so effective? The secret lies in diffusing your anxious anticipation. Anxiety thrives on avoidance and resistance. By deliberately leaning into the discomfort, you break your mind's habitual pattern of fighting fear. Instead, your brain experiences a sense of control, and anxiety's power evaporates. This trick isn't limited to small anxieties. It can revolutionize your mindset toward larger challenges as well. For instance, consider insomnia, the persistent inability to sleep despite your best efforts. Many people exacerbate sleeplessness by desperately willing themselves to drift off. Using paradoxical intention, you do the opposite. You lie in bed and sincerely attempt to stay awake as long as possible. You tell yourself, "I'm going to stay awake for hours. I'll see every single minute pass." Oddly enough, the pressure to fall asleep diminishes completely. Without the strain of actively trying to sleep, your mind relaxes naturally, leading you to drift off effortlessly. The beauty of paradoxical intention is that it exploits the rebellious nature of human psychology. Your mind often resists direct commands, especially when anxious or fearful. Paradoxical intention capitalizes on this resistance, harnessing your defiant subconscious to produce exactly the outcome you truly desire. So, the next time anxiety or fear grips you, rather than fighting it, embrace the absurdity. Invite it in. Dare it to overwhelm you completely. The paradox is this: the more boldly you face what terrifies you, the weaker it becomes. By mastering paradoxical intention, you're not just confronting your fears, you're outsmarting them. The Benjamin Franklin Effect. Have you ever thought about how asking someone to do a favor for you could actually make them like you more? It sounds counterintuitive, even backward, because logically, you might think that doing favors for others is what builds rapport. Surprisingly, psychology reveals that it's often the other way around, and this intriguing phenomenon is known as the Benjamin Franklin Effect. Benjamin Franklin, renowned for his diplomacy, stumbled upon this trick quite by accident. During his time in politics, Franklin encountered a stubborn rival, someone who disliked him intensely and blocked his efforts at every turn. Instead of responding with aggression or attempting to appease the man, Franklin did something remarkably clever. He asked his opponent for a favor. Knowing the rival owned a rare and prized book, Franklin politely requested to borrow it. Flattered and perhaps slightly surprised, his adversary agreed. Franklin returned the book with sincere thanks. Incredibly, from that moment forward, the previously bitter opponent became one of Franklin's staunchest allies. But why does this happen? The Benjamin Franklin effect is rooted in cognitive dissonance, a psychological discomfort that occurs when your thoughts, feelings, and actions don't align. When someone who initially dislikes you performs a kind act on your behalf, their mind struggles to reconcile the contradiction. Why would I help someone I dislike? To resolve this internal inconsistency, the brain subtly reshapes emotions, convincing itself, I must actually like this person, otherwise I wouldn't have helped them. This subtle yet powerful psychological phenomenon can profoundly transform your relationships and social interactions. By understanding that kindness received can be more impactful than kindness given, you gain an unexpected tool to build bridges and transform adversaries into allies. Imagine you're starting a new job and there's a co-worker who seems cold, distant, or even slightly hostile toward you. Your initial instinct might be to avoid this person, minimizing interactions to prevent discomfort. However, employing the Benjamin Franklin effect, you do something surprising. You approach this coworker and ask for help. Perhaps you ask them to explain a confusing work process or borrow a resource they're known to value. Even though it feels counterintuitive, this small favor request triggers a psychological shift. Your coworker's mind experiences dissonance. Why would they help someone they supposedly dislike or distrust? To alleviate this confusion, their subconscious reframes how they perceive you. Soon, their attitude shifts from distant neutrality or hostility into genuine friendliness, fostering a positive relationship. This psychological trick isn't about manipulation, but about creating opportunities for genuine connections. It teaches a deeper insight into human nature. Kindness and generosity toward others actually changes how we perceive them. We often believe we like people because we're nice to them. However, psychological evidence strongly suggests that it's precisely the act of doing good for others that creates a bond, not the reverse. Applying the Benjamin Franklin effect can significantly enhance your social influence and improve your interpersonal relationships. Whether you're navigating difficult family dynamics, attempting to foster positive workplace relationships, or simply aiming to turn acquaintances into friends, intentionally asking for small favors can be transformative. In your everyday interactions, start observing opportunities where a simple favor, asking for advice, borrowing something small, or requesting minor assistance might make all the difference. Rather than always seeking ways to assist others, remember the surprising wisdom Franklin discovered centuries ago, that allowing others to help you can forge deeper emotional bonds than you ever imagined possible. Semantic satiation. Have you ever repeated a word so many times that it suddenly sounded foreign, losing all meaning and becoming nothing more than a strange collection of sounds? Perhaps you've whispered spoon or tree repeatedly, noticing how quickly familiarity fades and the word starts to feel oddly detached. This unusual mental shift is called semantic satiation, a fascinating psychological phenomenon that can profoundly influence your mindset and emotions when harnessed correctly. The concept of semantic satiation was first identified by psychologist Leon Yakobovitz in the 1960s. He discovered that repeating a word aloud or mentally for an extended period gradually strips it of its meaning, disconnecting the linguistic structure from its conceptual or emotional associations. Essentially, your brain becomes so overexposed to the stimulus that it temporarily becomes desensitized, leaving the word strangely hollow and meaningless. But why does this bizarre psychological quirk matter, and how can it transform your mindset? The secret lies in the realization that words aren't just abstract symbols. They carry immense emotional power, influencing our feelings and perceptions. Words like failure, embarrassment, or rejection often evoke immediate emotional responses, trapping us in patterns of anxiety or self-doubt. By intentionally using semantic satiation, you can weaken the grip these emotionally charged words have over your mind. Consider an example of someone experiencing intense anxiety whenever the word failure arises. The mere thought triggers an overwhelming fear, causing stress and avoidance behaviors. Through semantic satiation, this individual can dismantle the power of that word by calmly repeating failure aloud, slowly and deliberately. For a minute or two, they begin to notice something peculiar. The word gradually loses its emotional resonance, transforming into nothing more than meaningless noise. Eventually, failure becomes stripped of its fearful associations, significantly reducing anxiety triggered by the concept. This fascinating process works by temporarily disrupting the neural pathways that connect words to their emotional context. Normally, when you encounter an emotionally charged term, your brain immediately recalls past experiences and associated feelings, but semantic satiation briefly interrupts this automatic connection, creating a unique opportunity to detach harmful emotions from powerful words. Imagine someone who is profoundly self-critical. Words like stupid, worthless, or weak consistently plague their thoughts, fueling low self-esteem and negative self-talk. By using semantic satiation strategically, they deliberately neutralize the impact of these damaging labels. Repeating stupid slowly and persistently turns the hurtful word into an abstract sequence of sounds, breaking its emotional grip. With practice, the individual finds it increasingly difficult to experience strong emotional reactions toward these words, dramatically improving their self-confidence and resilience. Semantic satiation also offers valuable insights into how language shapes reality. Often, it's our own internal dialogue, the words we choose consciously or unconsciously, that dictate how we feel and perceive the world around us. By selectively diffusing negative words through repetition, we reclaim control over our emotional landscape. To effectively use semantic satiation, simply select words or phrases that trigger anxiety, fear, or negativity. Sit quietly, then repeat the chosen word aloud, deliberately, and with gentle persistence. Notice how quickly its meaning evaporates, leaving behind a harmless string of sounds. With consistent practice, semantic satiation can become a powerful tool to free your mind from destructive associations, ultimately reshaping your internal narrative. In this subtle yet extraordinary psychological trick, words that once held power over you become powerless, reminding you that language only holds the emotional strength that you allow it to have. By mastering semantic satiation, you reclaim authority over your thoughts, emotions, and, ultimately, your entire mindset. The Pratfall Effect. It may seem odd, but sometimes making a mistake can be your greatest strength. Imagine you're attending a conference, watching two different speakers deliver presentations. The first speaker is flawlessly articulate, almost intimidatingly perfect. The second speaker is equally intelligent, but accidentally drops his notes halfway through his speech. As he bends down, chuckling nervously and making a self-deprecating joke about his clumsiness, the room warms toward him, laughter rippling through the audience. Curiously enough, people leave the conference remembering him more fondly than the impeccably polished speaker. This curious phenomenon is known as the Pratfall Effect, a psychological insight revealing that people tend to become more likable, approachable, and attractive precisely when they demonstrate vulnerability or commit minor blunders. Named by psychologist Elliot Aronson in the 1960s, the Pratfall Effect seems counterintuitive. We're naturally driven to hide our imperfections, believing they'll undermine how others perceive us. Yet, paradoxically, showing minor imperfections makes us appear more relatable, human, and trustworthy. The reason behind this effect lies in how we psychologically perceive competence and likability. High achievers or seemingly flawless people often provoke admiration, but from a distance. Their perfection can intimidate others, creating an emotional barrier that prevents genuine connection. However, when a capable individual makes a small, harmless mistake, like spilling coffee, forgetting a name briefly, or stumbling over words, it subtly signals vulnerability. This minor flaw breaks the psychological barrier, humanizing them and triggering feelings of empathy, warmth, and relatability. Consider a real-life scenario in the workplace. Imagine your colleague, Sarah, known for her high efficiency and near-perfect track record. Colleagues respect Sarah, but they find her slightly distant and intimidating because she rarely reveals any weakness. One day, during a crucial presentation, Sarah accidentally advances a slide too early, revealing an amusing cat meme she'd mistakenly left in her presentation. Embarrassed, Sarah laughs lightly, making a quick joke about needing more coffee. In that brief moment, Sarah's professional image shifts profoundly in everyone's minds, not negatively, but positively. Her small blunder breaks through her previously intimidating exterior, making her suddenly more likable, human, and approachable. Colleagues who once admired her from afar now feel comfortable approaching her, appreciating her newfound relatability. This psychological trick works powerfully in social settings, business negotiations, dating, and even in building personal brands. Many successful politicians, CEOs, and public figures intentionally showcase minor imperfections or humorous vulnerabilities because they intuitively recognize the strength hidden in the Pratfall Effect. Steve Jobs, for instance, famously faced technical glitches during product demonstrations and calmly laughed them off. Rather than weakening his image, these moments strengthened public perception of his authenticity and approachability. But caution is essential. The Pratfall Effect doesn't suggest deliberate incompetence or frequent carelessness. Rather, it emphasizes authenticity and humility. Strategic mistakes must be minor, relatable, and balanced by evident competence. A competent person making a small mistake is charming. An incompetent person doing the same may reinforce negative impressions. By harnessing the Pratfall Effect consciously, you gain a powerful tool to deepen connections, enhance your likability, and improve social dynamics. Next time you're tempted to mask every imperfection, remember the secret strength hidden in genuine vulnerability. Allowing people to see small flaws can dramatically transform how they perceive and relate to you. Embrace your imperfections wisely, because sometimes the fastest way to someone's heart isn't through perfection, but through the relatable charm of a perfectly imperfect moment. The Solomon Paradox. Have you ever noticed how easily you can solve a friend's complicated problems, yet when it comes to your own issues, clarity vanishes, leaving you lost in confusion and indecision? Perhaps you've given perfect advice to a loved one on a relationship matter, only to realize later that you're struggling with something almost identical yourself. This puzzling phenomenon has a name, the Solomon Paradox, and understanding it could profoundly shift how you approach your most difficult decisions. Named after the biblical King Solomon, who was famously wise in resolving disputes for others, yet notoriously flawed in his own personal decisions, the Solomon Paradox highlights a powerful psychological blind spot. Simply put, people are far better at analyzing, understanding, and advising on problems when they belong to someone else rather than themselves. Our judgment tends to sharpen dramatically when we're emotionally distanced from a situation, yet becomes cloudy when personal stakes are high. But why does this strange paradox occur? The answer lies in emotional detachment. When examining other people's issues, you're able to step back, see the full picture, and assess situations logically and objectively. This distance gives you clarity, helping you weigh pros and cons without emotional interference. Conversely, when dealing with your own dilemmas, emotions flood your reasoning, clouding judgment and magnifying minor details until rational thinking becomes nearly impossible. To illustrate, imagine Sarah, a gifted counselor known for helping friends navigate relationship difficulties with wisdom and empathy. Her insights are always practical and precise, cutting through complicated emotional tangles effortlessly. Yet, when Sarah faces struggles in her own relationship, clarity evaporates. Suddenly, simple decisions seem paralyzing, emotions overwhelm logic, and confusion reigns. Friends who admire her advice often wonder why she doesn't apply it to herself, but that's exactly where the Solomon paradox emerges. This paradox, however, also offers a profound opportunity. Understanding the Solomon paradox gives you the key to overcoming it. The solution? Treat your problems as if they belong to someone else. By mentally stepping out of your situation and imagining it belongs to a close friend or a family member, you create the emotional distance needed to see clearly. You begin to analyze your circumstances objectively, just as if you were advising someone else. This psychological trick works by artificially recreating the conditions under which your mind naturally excels: distance, objectivity, and detachment. Returning to Sarah's example, once she understands the Solomon paradox, she intentionally shifts perspective. Instead of agonizing over her own emotional turmoil, Sarah imagines her situation as if it were happening to a friend. She writes down her thoughts, picturing herself in the third person. In doing so, Sarah finds that solutions appear effortlessly. Options she hadn't even considered suddenly become obvious, and her anxiety decreases dramatically. This simple yet powerful psychological technique has profound implications. By consciously adopting an outsider's viewpoint, you can vastly improve decision-making, reduce emotional distress, and approach life's dilemmas with renewed confidence and clarity. Whether dealing with personal relationships, career choices, or internal conflicts, recognizing the Solomon paradox transforms emotional turmoil into actionable insight. So, the next time you're stuck in indecision or frustration, pause and remember King Solomon. Ask yourself, what advice would I give if this problem belonged to someone else? This one simple question, rooted deeply in psychological understanding, can profoundly shift your mindset, illuminating paths previously hidden. Ironically, the greatest wisdom often lies not within, but in the ability to view our own lives through the clear lens of an outsider. Limerence Regulation. Have you ever found yourself uncontrollably fixated on someone, unable to stop thinking about them, constantly replaying conversations, obsessively analyzing their smallest gestures? Perhaps it started innocently, just a harmless crush or attraction, but soon evolved into an all-consuming obsession that overwhelmed your thoughts, emotions, and even your daily routines. This intense psychological state is known as limerence, a powerful, involuntary, emotional attraction that can dominate your mind, often causing anxiety, emotional dependency, and loss of self-control. Understanding limerence is essential, but even more important is learning how to regulate it effectively. Limerence regulation is a psychological technique designed to manage and ultimately reduce the overwhelming power of these intense emotional obsessions, restoring emotional clarity and stability. But what exactly causes limerence, and why can it feel so overwhelming? Unlike typical romantic feelings, limerence is characterized by an obsessive, uncontrollable attachment towards someone, often accompanied by intense anxiety and uncertainty about reciprocation. This obsessive fixation typically thrives on uncertainty or mixed signals from the other person, fueling an endless loop of hope, doubt, and emotional turbulence. When you're stuck in limerence, rational thinking disappears, replaced by compulsive daydreaming, idealization, and constant craving for reassurance or validation. Regulating limerence starts with recognizing that it's not love, it's an addictive psychological state driven largely by neurochemical responses in the brain. The first critical step is awareness, understanding that your obsessive thoughts and intense feelings aren't a reliable indicator of genuine love or compatibility, but rather symptoms of your brain's desperate craving for validation and connection. Next, effective limerence regulation involves actively reducing uncertainty and idealization, the two primary fuels for limerence's intensity. For instance, consider Emma, who finds herself profoundly fixated on her coworker David. At first, Emma enjoys the rush of excitement whenever David acknowledges her, yet soon her entire emotional well-being becomes dependent on his smallest gestures. Every friendly interaction fuels Emma's obsession further, causing her anxiety and emotional instability to spiral uncontrollably. Emma decides to employ limerence regulation. Instead of passively fantasizing or seeking indirect signs of David's interest, she actively challenges her idealization. She consciously acknowledges David's imperfections and stops herself from overanalyzing every minor interaction. By directly confronting her idealized perception, Emma gradually breaks down the emotional intensity, slowly regaining control over her thoughts and emotions. Another powerful element of limerence regulation involves redirecting obsessive energy into self-growth. Rather than endlessly daydreaming or waiting for reassurance, Emma invests her time and emotional energy in personal projects, hobbies, and self-care. By strengthening her identity independently, Emma significantly reduces the power of limerence, restoring balance and emotional autonomy. Moreover, limiting exposure and contact, at least temporarily, can greatly reduce limerence's grip. Frequent interactions or social media stalking perpetuate obsessive cycles, intensifying feelings of emotional dependence. By consciously reducing these triggers, the mind has fewer opportunities to reinforce obsessive thoughts, allowing emotional detachment to occur naturally. Finally, limerence regulation includes reframing your emotional experience. Instead of interpreting obsessive emotions as signals of destiny or fate, Emma reminds herself they're merely temporary psychological states, intense yet fleeting neurochemical reactions. This reframing allows her to approach feelings with curiosity rather than desperation, gradually diffusing their overwhelming intensity. Limerence regulation isn't about suppressing or denying feelings, but about reclaiming emotional clarity, freedom, and control. By understanding limerence's psychological mechanisms, actively reducing idealization and uncertainty, and channeling emotional energy into personal growth, you transform overwhelming obsession into self-awareness, independence, and emotional balance. The intensity of limerence fades, leaving you with something far more valuable, a profound understanding of yourself, your emotional patterns, and your power to master them. Self-distancing language. Have you ever noticed how much easier it is to advise a friend in trouble compared to dealing with your own issues? When friends face difficulties, solutions often seem clear, obvious, and manageable. But when those same challenges arise in your own life, emotions suddenly cloud your perspective, and decision-making feels overwhelmingly complex. This familiar struggle occurs because you're emotionally entangled in your personal problems, and it can seriously disrupt clarity and judgment. But what if there was a simple psychological trick that could instantly grant you the clear, objective perspective usually reserved for advising others? This powerful method is called self-distancing language, a fascinating psychological technique that involves stepping back from your own emotional experience by talking to yourself in the third person or using your own name instead of the typical I or me. It may sound odd at first, perhaps even silly, but this small linguistic shift dramatically enhances emotional clarity, reduces anxiety, and sharpens your decision-making abilities. Why does self-distancing language have such a profound effect on your mindset? The secret lies in how your brain processes emotions. When you're emotionally invested in a personal problem, your brain instinctively triggers a flood of stress hormones, clouding rational thinking and amplifying emotional turmoil. However, shifting into third-person language temporarily distances your mind from these emotions, tricking it into treating your personal issue as if it belongs to someone else. This subtle but powerful shift allows your mind to engage your prefrontal cortex, the rational, logical part of your brain, giving you clearer insights, balanced judgment, and better emotional regulation. Imagine you have an important job interview tomorrow. Anxiety grips you as negative thoughts spiral through your mind. What if I fail? What if I embarrass myself? What if I say the wrong thing? These fearful thoughts rapidly multiply, intensifying your stress. Now, try self-distancing language. Instead of internalizing panic, you shift your self-talk deliberately. Sarah feels anxious about tomorrow's interview because she's nervous about making a good impression. What can Sarah realistically do to feel more confident and prepared? Instantly, the anxiety begins to diminish. Your mind treats Sarah's situation objectively, as though offering calm, rational advice to a friend. Solutions and reassurance surface naturally, dramatically reducing emotional intensity. Studies confirm the remarkable effectiveness of self-distancing language. Researchers at the University of Michigan found that when people reflected on emotional events using third-person language, they experienced significantly less anxiety and negative emotion. Additionally, their brains showed reduced activity in regions associated with emotional distress, proving that merely shifting perspective through language could profoundly change emotional responses. Practicing self-distancing language can be transformative across various situations, from handling conflicts in relationships to managing stress and anxiety at work. Suppose you're in the middle of a heated argument with your partner, emotions escalating rapidly. Instead of reacting immediately and impulsively, you step back internally and calmly say to yourself, "Alex feels upset because his feelings aren't being acknowledged right now. What can Alex say or do to make the conversation productive rather than destructive?" Suddenly, emotional charge decreases, creating space for productive dialogue rather than impulsive reactions. Ultimately, the power of self-distancing language lies in its ability to transform your emotional experiences from overwhelming crises into manageable problems. By deliberately speaking to yourself from an outsider's perspective, you gain the clarity, emotional stability, and rational thinking typically available only when advising others. It's a small linguistic trick with profound psychological benefits, allowing you to become your own calm and reliable advisor whenever life's challenges become overwhelming. Next time emotions threaten your judgment, remember, shifting your language shifts your perspective, giving you the powerful ability to step outside yourself and regain emotional control. Reciprocal silence. Have you ever found yourself in a conversation where the other person suddenly falls quiet, leaving a long pause hanging in the air? Instinctively, you feel compelled to fill that silence. Maybe you start talking more, sharing thoughts or secrets you hadn't intended to reveal. Interestingly, what feels like an uncomfortable moment to you could actually be a deliberate psychological technique known as reciprocal silence. Reciprocal silence is the subtle art of intentionally using silence in conversation to encourage others to open up, share more details, or reveal deeper truths. It exploits a fundamental quirk in human nature, our innate discomfort with silence. When conversation stalls, our minds interpret silence as tension, prompting us to quickly speak and fill that perceived void. Skilled conversationalists know that silence is not an absence of communication, but a powerful tool for psychological influence. But why does silence affect us so profoundly? The answer lies in our deep-rooted social instincts. Humans are social creatures, programmed to maintain connections through continuous dialogue and interaction. When someone pauses unexpectedly, the rhythm of conversation breaks, creating a subtle pressure. That pressure naturally compels the other person to restore balance by speaking, often more openly than they intended. Consider a scenario involving Lisa, a seasoned negotiator trying to close a difficult business deal. Her counterpart, Mark, firmly insists he can't reduce his price further. Lisa calmly nods, and then, instead of responding, simply sits back quietly, holding Mark's gaze without saying a word. Initially confident, Mark begins to feel increasingly uneasy as seconds tick by. The silence weighs on him, subtly urging him to reconsider his stance. Eventually, feeling the need to break the awkward tension, Mark starts talking again, inadvertently revealing hidden details about his position or even offering a new compromise. Without uttering a single additional word, Lisa has skillfully shifted the balance of the negotiation entirely in her favor. In personal interactions, reciprocal silence is equally powerful. Imagine you're speaking with a friend who's reluctant to discuss a sensitive personal issue. After your friend gives a brief, evasive response, you resist the instinct to immediately ask another question or fill the gap. Instead, you simply stay silent, offering a patient, supportive glance. In that silence, your friend gradually feels compelled to elaborate further, diving into deeper feelings or hidden concerns they previously hesitated to reveal. The silence has created a safe yet irresistible pressure, gently guiding them to open up more than words alone could have encouraged. It's important, however, to practice reciprocal silence wisely. Excessive or awkward silence can backfire, causing discomfort or even mistrust. The key is timing and intention. Skillful silence is neither threatening nor manipulative. Instead, it feels natural, supportive, and patient. It's about allowing room for the other person's thoughts, emotions, and subconscious impulses to naturally rise to the surface. Moreover, silence isn't merely a trick to extract information. It's also a pathway toward deeper understanding and empathy. By embracing silence thoughtfully, you convey respect, patience, and genuine interest, qualities that strengthen emotional bonds and foster trust. In your daily interactions, become mindful of moments when silence could be more powerful than words. Whether you're negotiating, counseling a friend, or simply seeking deeper connections, consciously incorporating reciprocal silence can profoundly enhance your conversations. You'll soon discover that some of the most meaningful insights, agreements, and connections are often hidden within the silence you've always felt compelled to avoid. Embrace it consciously, and you'll unlock the psychological power hidden in the spaces between words. Einstellung Effect awareness. Have you ever gotten stuck on a problem, endlessly repeating the same approach even though it clearly isn't working? Maybe you've struggled to fix something around the house, continuously using the same method because it worked once before, even though it's now failing repeatedly. You're convinced there's no better way, so you keep hammering away at it, becoming increasingly frustrated. This surprisingly common psychological trap is known as the Einstellung Effect, and becoming aware of it can radically transform your problem-solving abilities and overall mindset. The Einstellung Effect describes our brain's stubborn habit of defaulting to familiar solutions, even when simpler or better alternatives exist. First identified by psychologist Abraham Luchins in the 1940s, this mental phenomenon explains how previous successes can actually limit future creativity. Once our mind identifies a method that has worked before, we unconsciously become blind to alternative possibilities, often failing to recognize more efficient, innovative, or simpler solution sitting right in front of us. But why does our brain fall into this limiting pattern so easily? The answer lies in cognitive efficiency. Our minds naturally prefer familiar routes, conserving mental energy by relying on established patterns. Just as we choose the same familiar path home from work without consciously thinking, our brains prefer well-worn mental pathways to new ones, even if those pathways are outdated or ineffective. This mental rigidity prevents us from seeing the obvious alternatives right under our noses. To illustrate the Einstellung Effect clearly, imagine a chess player repeatedly employing the same defensive strategy during every match because it brought victory once. Even when opponents adapt and easily counteract the trick, the player stubbornly clings to this outdated approach. He becomes unable to recognize more effective methods because his mind has become fixated, trapped by the belief that this familiar approach remains the best possible solution. His victories decrease, frustration builds, yet he remains locked in this cognitive loop. This is the Einstellung Effect in action. Awareness is the first and most critical step toward overcoming this psychological trap. Once you recognize the Einstellung Effect's influence, you begin to see situations differently. You consciously question familiar approaches, challenging your habitual solutions and forcing your brain out of autopilot mode. Instead of immediately defaulting to past methods, you deliberately pause and ask yourself, is there a better, simpler, or different way to approach this? Consider another practical example. Linda, a successful marketing executive, repeatedly uses one particular campaign style simply because it delivered excellent results years ago. Despite diminishing returns in recent campaigns, Linda remains committed to this outdated formula, unable to imagine any better alternatives. When Linda becomes aware of the Einstellung Effect, however, she consciously questions her assumptions. She deliberately steps back, pauses, and asks, am I choosing this strategy out of habit, or is it truly the most effective option? By intentionally interrupting her habitual thinking, Linda opens the door for fresh, creative approaches. She quickly discovers innovative strategies she previously overlooked, significantly improving her outcomes. Einstellung Effect. Awareness isn't just about avoiding mental stagnation, it's about actively cultivating cognitive flexibility and creativity. By understanding this psychological limitation, you equip yourself with the mental agility needed to innovate, adapt, and evolve in every aspect of life, from business and personal relationships to everyday problem solving. Next time you face a challenging situation, pause and ask yourself if you're falling victim to familiar habits and outdated solutions. Simply acknowledging the Einstellung Effect can dramatically shift your perspective, opening your mind to new possibilities and enabling you to approach problems creatively, flexibly, and effectively. In doing so, you'll transform a hidden psychological trap into one of your greatest strengths. Deflection mirroring. Have you ever found yourself caught in a conversation where someone keeps pushing you with overly personal questions you'd prefer not to answer directly? Maybe they're probing into your private life, your opinions, or your emotional vulnerabilities, leaving you feeling cornered and uncomfortable. Often, people respond by either reluctantly giving in, awkwardly avoiding the question, or abruptly ending the conversation altogether. But what if there was an effortless, subtle way to flip the conversation around, gently redirecting the pressure back onto the other person? This powerful yet elegant trick is known as deflection mirroring. Deflection mirroring is a subtle psychological technique that involves responding to intrusive or uncomfortable questions by gracefully redirecting similar questions back toward the original asker. Instead of bluntly refusing to answer or allowing yourself to become emotionally vulnerable, you maintain control and emotional distance by gently shifting the focus back onto them. This trick leverages a deep-rooted psychological principle. People naturally find it difficult to resist answering a mirrored question, primarily because human beings instinctively seek to maintain conversational equilibrium. But why does this trick work so effectively? The answer lies in the innate human desire for balance and reciprocity in social interactions. When someone asks a deeply personal or intrusive question, they inadvertently create an imbalance, placing you at a psychological disadvantage. Instead of becoming defensive, deflection mirroring cleverly restores balance by mirroring the question back, causing the original asker to subconsciously feel compelled to respond in kind. Consider this scenario. You're at a family gathering and a distant relative begins probing uncomfortably into your personal life, asking, "Why aren't you married yet? Aren't you getting older?" Rather than stumbling awkwardly, becoming defensive, or giving in to discomfort, you calmly reply with a gentle, mirrored question. "That's an interesting question. How about you? How did you know when it was the right time to get married?" Suddenly, the relative finds themselves gently redirected onto their own personal experiences. Instead of continuing their intrusive questioning, they naturally shift to sharing their own story, easing the pressure off you entirely. You've gracefully transformed a potentially awkward moment into a comfortable, balanced conversation, all without revealing details you'd prefer to keep private. Deflection mirroring isn't just useful in personal conversations, it's also incredibly effective in professional contexts. Imagine you're negotiating a business deal and your counterpart persistently pushes you for information you'd rather not share openly, perhaps your bottom line or specific intentions. Rather than becoming defensive or evasive, you mirror their inquiry with a similar question back toward them. That's an important question. What price range would you consider most reasonable in this situation? By subtly reversing the conversational momentum, you shift the dynamic, compelling them to reveal their thoughts first. Without becoming adversarial or evasive, you've smoothly regained conversational advantage. Moreover, deflection mirroring is more than just defensive. It subtly influences perceptions, often increasing your likability and conversational power. By encouraging others to talk more openly about themselves, you trigger positive psychological reactions, as most people find self-disclosure inherently rewarding and enjoyable. This increases rapport, improves your interpersonal skills, and positions you as a skilled conversationalist who manages sensitive discussions effortlessly. Practicing deflection. Mirroring requires subtlety, timing, and confidence. The key is to respond gently, casually, and genuinely, never aggressively or sarcastically. With practice, you'll find yourself easily navigating challenging social interactions, effortlessly maintaining control while simultaneously building connection and trust. Next time someone attempts to push your boundaries with uncomfortable questions, remember, you don't have to surrender personal boundaries or emotional control. Instead, calmly redirect their curiosity back toward them, employing deflection mirroring to restore conversational equilibrium gracefully. This powerful yet subtle psychological trick transforms uncomfortable situations into opportunities for deeper connection, rapport, and control, leaving you confidently in command of any conversation. Narrative bias, exploitation. Have you ever wondered why you remember stories so vividly, yet often forget dry facts almost instantly? Perhaps you still recall detailed plots from childhood bedtime tales or emotional twists from your favorite movies, even years after hearing them. But when someone presents you with statistics or data, those same details often fade rapidly. This striking psychological difference is known as narrative bias, the human mind's remarkable preference for absorbing, remembering, and responding powerfully to information delivered in a narrative form. Narrative bias. Exploitation is the skillful psychological trick of deliberately leveraging this human preference for stories to influence thoughts, feelings, and decisions. When you frame information or ideas within the compelling structure of a narrative, you engage not just logical thinking, but also emotional and imaginative processes deep within the brain. The human mind naturally craves stories, instinctively shaping even random facts into meaningful narratives. By intentionally crafting narratives around your message, you dramatically increase its emotional impact, memorability, and persuasive power. But why exactly do narratives have such powerful influence? It's because stories trigger the release of specific brain chemicals, including dopamine, cortisol, and oxytocin, substances associated with attention, empathy, connection, and memory. When listening to a narrative, our brains become emotionally invested, causing us to feel deeply connected to the events, characters, or ideas described. By contrast, pure facts and figures fail to trigger these emotional chemicals, leaving little lasting impact. Consider an example. A charity organization seeks donations for disaster relief. They could simply present statistics, how many people were affected, financial costs, and logistical details. But such numbers alone rarely provoke emotional response. Instead, they choose narrative bias exploitation, telling the vivid, emotionally charged story of a single family's struggle and loss during the disaster. They describe the family's desperation, courage, and resilience in emotional detail, painting a vivid mental picture of suffering and hope. Suddenly, abstract statistics become powerfully real, eliciting genuine empathy, emotional connection, and ultimately far greater willingness from listeners to donate generously. Businesses also use narrative bias strategically. Imagine two companies introducing a similar health product. One emphasizes clinical data, technical details, and scientific specifications, while the other crafts a compelling narrative around a customer whose health dramatically improved after using their product. Even if both products are equally effective, customers overwhelmingly prefer and remember the second one. The vivid narrative of personal transformation evokes emotional investment, trust, and lasting memory in ways statistics alone could never achieve. Narrative bias exploitation isn't about deceiving or manipulating. Instead, it harnesses an innate psychological truth. Human beings inherently seek meaning, emotion, and connection in everything they encounter. Narratives provide structure, purpose, and emotional resonance, making complex ideas simple, memorable, and deeply persuasive. In your personal and professional life, mastering this psychological trick can be transformative. Whether persuading colleagues to embrace your ideas, convincing clients to trust your product, or simply ensuring your message resonates deeply, intentionally crafting narratives around your communication vastly improves outcomes. Rather than presenting bare facts, consciously wrap them in meaningful stories, describe relatable characters, emotional experiences, and transformative journeys. Allow listeners to feel the struggles, joys, and triumphs deeply, embedding your message into their emotional memory permanently. Narrative bias exploitation leverages one of the human brain's most powerful universal instincts. Stories captivate us, influence us, and transform us. By consciously choosing narrative structure over raw data alone, you dramatically amplify emotional resonance, memorability, and persuasiveness. Next time you're communicating important information, pause and remember, the human mind isn't merely a logic machine, it's a storytelling machine. Exploiting narrative bias strategically ensures your message isn't just heard, but deeply felt, remembered, and embraced. Cognitive reframing. Have you ever noticed how two people can experience the exact same situation, yet interpret it completely differently? One sees a setback as devastating failure, plunging into despair, while the other perceives the very same event as an opportunity to grow stronger, learn valuable lessons, and even feel empowered. What creates this astonishing difference in perception isn't the situation itself. It's the unique way each person frames their experience. This powerful psychological tool called cognitive reframing can dramatically shift your mindset, transforming obstacles into opportunities, stress into strength, and emotional suffering into empowerment. Cognitive reframing involves consciously changing how you interpret or frame a situation, shifting your perspective to focus on positive or constructive aspects rather than dwelling on negativity. It's based on a profound psychological truth. Your emotional reactions aren't caused by events themselves, but by how you interpret those events. By altering the interpretation, you literally reshape your emotional experience, often dramatically reducing stress, anxiety, and negativity. Why does cognitive reframing work so effectively? It's because our brains continuously create stories around everything we experience, instantly assigning meaning and emotions to events. Often, we unconsciously accept these initial interpretations as absolute truth, unaware that alternative perspectives exist. Reframing forces you to actively challenge negative assumptions, consciously choosing interpretations that empower rather than diminish your emotional resilience. Imagine you're giving an important presentation at work, and midway through, you notice people whispering and looking distracted. Your initial reaction is panic. They must be bored. I'm doing terribly. Your anxiety spikes, your confidence collapses, and your presentation falters. Now consider applying cognitive reframing. Instead of immediately accepting a negative interpretation, you consciously pause and ask yourself, is there another explanation? Could they simply be discussing something important I've said, or even unrelated to me? This simple shift dramatically reduces your anxiety, allowing your confidence and clarity to return, improving your performance. By reframing the scenario, you've transformed potential disaster into controlled strength. Consider another common scenario, receiving critical feedback. Initially, your instinct might be defensiveness, hurt, or even anger. Your brain automatically frames the critique as an attack, triggering emotional distress. However, by consciously reframing criticism as valuable information, a useful tool to improve and grow, you instantly neutralize emotional turmoil. The exact same feedback becomes an empowering opportunity rather than a source of pain. Cognitive reframing isn't about ignoring reality or denying difficulties. It's about choosing perspectives that serve your emotional well-being, growth, and resilience. Even profound setbacks can be reframed positively. Losing a job might initially feel catastrophic, yet reframing it as an opportunity to pursue meaningful passions, reconnect with personal values, or embrace needed change transforms emotional devastation into inspiring hopefulness. The psychological benefits of cognitive reframing are profound and scientifically proven. Numerous studies indicate that individuals skilled in reframing experience significantly lower stress, anxiety, and depression levels, coupled with greater resilience, optimism, and emotional stability. To effectively practice cognitive reframing, start becoming aware of your initial interpretations and emotions during challenging situations. Pause before accepting negative assumptions automatically. Consciously ask yourself, what alternative perspectives exist? How can I see this differently? Even initially resistant minds quickly become skilled at reframing, and emotional reactions rapidly shift towards strength, empowerment, and resilience. Cognitive reframing gives you extraordinary psychological power, the power to consciously shape your emotional landscape. Life continually presents situations you cannot control, but through reframing, you gain absolute control over how you emotionally experience them. Every challenge becomes an opportunity, every setback a stepping stone, every stressor a source of growth. Next time negativity arises, remember, the event isn't what's causing your distress. It's your interpretation. Change your perspective, and you profoundly change your emotional reality. The anchoring reset. Picture this scenario. You walk into an upscale clothing boutique and your eyes land immediately on a luxury jacket priced outrageously high, far beyond your expectations. At first glance, you might scoff, dismissing it as absurdly overpriced. Yet moments later, you spot another stylish jacket nearby, priced significantly lower but still costly. Surprisingly, your perspective shifts dramatically. Suddenly, that second jacket feels reasonably priced, even appealing, despite initially being more than you planned to spend. Without realizing it, your perception has been skillfully guided by a powerful psychological trick known as the anchoring reset. Anchoring refers to the cognitive bias where the first piece of information you encounter sets a reference point, shaping how you perceive everything afterward. Your brain unconsciously uses this initial anchor to judge all subsequent details, causing profound shifts in your evaluations and decisions. The anchoring reset is a strategic variation that involves deliberately introducing an exaggerated anchor first, followed swiftly by your actual intended proposition. By doing this, you cleverly recalibrate perceptions, causing your second offer, though perhaps still ambitious, to seem incredibly attractive, logical, and surprisingly reasonable. The potency of the anchoring reset arises from a fundamental psychological truth. Humans rarely evaluate numbers or values objectively. Instead, we instinctively rely on comparisons. Our minds constantly seek reference points to determine what feels expensive, fair, desirable, or reasonable. By initially presenting an exaggerated anchor, you subtly manipulate these reference points. This exaggerated figure temporarily skews perceptions, establishing a mental baseline so high that your subsequent realistic proposal feels refreshingly acceptable. Consider a negotiation for a raise at your job. You're determined to secure a meaningful increase, but know it might be difficult to justify directly. Instead of immediately stating your actual desired salary, you strategically start by proposing a deliberately inflated, somewhat ambitious figure, one considerably higher than you genuinely expect. Naturally, your manager responds skeptically, perhaps indicating the figure is beyond the company's reach. At this moment, you smoothly introduce your genuine goal, a more realistic yet still ambitious salary increase. Because your manager's initial mental anchor was set so high, your actual proposal now appears entirely reasonable, attractive, and justified in comparison. Had you initially mentioned your real request, it might have seemed excessive or challenging. Instead, you've skillfully used the anchoring reset to shift perceptions entirely in your favor. This trick applies equally well in personal scenarios. Imagine you're trying to persuade your partner to agree to an expensive vacation. Initially, you describe a lavish, extravagant trip, one that clearly exceeds your shared budget. After your partner's understandable hesitation, you swiftly suggest your true desired trip, still costly, yet significantly more reasonable. Suddenly, this realistic vacation option feels incredibly appealing compared to the initial extravagant anchor, dramatically increasing your partner's willingness to agree. The beauty of the anchoring reset lies in its elegant simplicity and subtle influence. It reshapes perception without confrontation, effortlessly guiding people toward the outcomes you desire. Whether in professional negotiations, personal decisions, sales scenarios, or daily interactions, this trick significantly enhances your persuasive impact. Mastering the anchoring reset requires careful calibration. Your initial exaggerated anchor must be substantial enough to create a strong contrast, yet not so unrealistic that it damages credibility. Immediately afterward, your genuine proposal gains immense psychological appeal, effortlessly perceived as rational, balanced, and advantageous. Next time you're preparing to negotiate or persuade, remember the anchoring reset. By strategically introducing exaggerated anchors first, you powerfully shift perceptions, transforming ambitious proposals into irresistible offers. Harnessing this subtle psychological tool can dramatically amplify your effectiveness, influence, and success in every conversation and interaction. Silent authority. When a leader walks into a room, you often sense their presence immediately, even if they haven't yet spoken a single word. Their calm confidence and unwavering composure draw your attention effortlessly, quietly commanding respect without overt action. This powerful phenomenon isn't about loudness or aggression, nor does it involve demanding obedience or forcefully imposing authority. Instead, it's a subtle yet highly effective psychological trick known as silent authority. Silent authority is the ability to influence, persuade, and command respect without raising your voice or asserting dominance directly. It is authority expressed through composed body language, steady eye contact, thoughtful silence, and carefully measured speech. Rather than relying on forceful commands, emotional manipulation, or aggressive persuasion, silent authority leverages psychological subtlety and emotional intelligence. It creates an impression of natural leadership, strength, and credibility that others instinctively trust, follow, and respect. But why does silent authority hold such incredible power? The answer lies in how our brains unconsciously interpret nonverbal cues and perceive confidence. Human beings are hardwired to respond strongly to signals of strength, confidence, and calm authority, qualities communicated far more effectively through silence and measured composure than through loudness or emotional volatility. When someone speaks softly yet decisively, or maintains calm silence during moments of tension, our minds instinctively perceive them as powerful, trustworthy, and credible. Consider an example involving two team leaders addressing their respective groups during a crisis at work. The first leader reacts loudly, emotionally, and impulsively, demanding immediate action while visibly panicking. Although urgent and forceful, his authority quickly erodes as his team subconsciously senses his underlying fear and uncertainty. By contrast, the second leader faces a similar crisis with quiet composure. She calmly addresses her team, speaking quietly but confidently, and remains thoughtfully silent between statements, allowing her words to resonate deeply. Her team immediately senses her strength, calmness, and control, naturally responding with confidence and respect, willing to follow her leadership unquestionably. The difference? The second leader skillfully harnessed silent authority. Silent authority isn't limited to leadership roles. It can profoundly enhance influence and effectiveness in all aspects of life, from personal relationships and negotiations to social interactions. Imagine a parent quietly but firmly addressing a misbehaving child. Rather than raising their voice or losing composure, their silence, combined with steady eye contact and gentle yet clear boundaries, conveys far more powerful authority than shouting ever could. Similarly, in business negotiations, someone who calmly listens without interrupting, pauses thoughtfully before responding, and speaks softly yet decisively exerts far greater influence than one who aggressively pushes their point or anxiously fills silence with unnecessary words. The secret to mastering silent authority lies in self-control, patience, and emotional awareness. It requires being comfortable with silence and understanding its psychological impact on others. It means speaking fewer words, but choosing each word with precise intention and clarity. Silent authority involves maintaining consistent eye contact, using calm body language, and avoiding unnecessary emotional reactions or impulsive gestures. Practicing silent authority transforms your presence profoundly. People naturally gravitate toward quiet confidence, perceiving it as trustworthy, stable, and influential. Rather than forcing your viewpoint through loudness or aggression, Silent authority effortlessly guides others to respect and follow you willingly, creating influence rooted deeply in trust and psychological resonance. Next time you want to exert authority or influence effectively, remember the power of silence and composure. Resist the temptation to speak loudly or impulsively. Instead, embrace silence, maintain calm control, and speak softly yet purposefully. By skillfully employing silent authority, you effortlessly command attention, respect, and influence in ways loudness or aggression could never achieve. Sympathy fatigue. Everyone appreciates emotional openness and honesty, right? It feels good to express your vulnerabilities, share your struggles, and lean on friends or loved ones for support. But have you ever noticed how, after repeatedly hearing someone's constant complaints or endless stream of emotional struggles, your empathy begins to fade, your patience wears thin, your compassion diminishes, and you begin emotionally distancing yourself from the person you once supported deeply? This surprising phenomenon, where consistent exposure to someone's emotional distress actually reduces empathy rather than enhancing it, is known as sympathy fatigue. Sympathy fatigue is a psychological reaction where continued exposure to another person's emotional suffering gradually reduces your capacity for empathy, compassion, and emotional support. Initially, when someone shares difficulties or vulnerabilities, human beings naturally respond with genuine concern, empathy, and emotional engagement. However, when that person consistently and repeatedly shares their emotional burdens without signs of progress or improvement, listeners unconsciously begin experiencing fatigue. Over time, empathy diminishes, replaced by subtle annoyance, emotional withdrawal, or even active resentment. But why does sympathy fatigue occur, and how does it influence relationships and interactions? The answer lies in the human brain's natural desire for emotional reciprocity and problem solving. Humans instinctively seek emotional equilibrium, preferring balanced relationships where emotional sharing is reciprocal and accompanied by forward momentum or action. When someone continuously expresses emotional distress without attempting to resolve issues or improve their situation, their problems begin feeling overwhelming, draining, and burdensome. Instead of generating ongoing empathy, the listener unconsciously experiences frustration, emotional depletion, and an instinctive desire to distance themselves emotionally. Consider an example. Jenna, a supportive friend, frequently comforts her friend, Maya, who constantly complains about her difficult job. At first, Jenna empathizes deeply, offering compassion, advice, and emotional support. However, Maya repeatedly discusses the same struggles, rarely implementing any solutions or taking meaningful action to improve her situation. Gradually, Jenna's initial empathy shifts to irritation and emotional exhaustion. Maya's constant negativity becomes draining, causing Jenna to withdraw emotionally or even avoid interactions altogether. Jenna is experiencing sympathy fatigue, a natural psychological response triggered by persistent, unresolved emotional distress from others. Interestingly, sympathy fatigue isn't limited to personal relationships. Healthcare professionals, therapists, teachers, and others in supportive roles frequently experience compassion fatigue, a variation of sympathy fatigue caused by prolonged exposure to clients or patients' emotional suffering without sufficient self-care or emotional boundaries. Recognizing sympathy fatigue enables professionals to implement healthy emotional boundaries, self-care practices, and supportive techniques that protect their emotional well-being while continuing to provide genuine, effective support. But understanding sympathy fatigue isn't about discouraging emotional vulnerability or reducing empathy. Far from it. Instead, recognizing this psychological reaction allows both parties to navigate emotional interactions more consciously, healthily, and sustainably. It encourages individuals facing emotional struggles to actively pursue improvement or solutions rather than repeatedly dwelling in emotional distress. Simultaneously, it reminds supportive individuals to establish compassionate yet clear emotional boundaries, self-care practices, and healthy communication patterns, preserving their emotional well-being while remaining genuinely empathetic. If you're someone frequently supporting others emotionally, recognizing early signs of sympathy fatigue, such as increasing impatience, emotional withdrawal, or irritation, allows you to proactively address it through conscious self-care, emotional boundaries, and gentle yet honest communication. Similarly, if you're facing emotional struggles yourself, understanding sympathy fatigue encourages you to seek support constructively, balancing vulnerability with genuine attempts at growth, action, and self-improvement. Sympathy fatigue is a crucial psychological insight, highlighting the delicate balance between emotional support and emotional exhaustion. Recognizing this phenomenon empowers healthier relationships, stronger emotional boundaries, and more sustainable, genuine empathy. Rather than experiencing diminished compassion, understanding sympathy fatigue allows you to maintain deep, authentic empathy and emotional support, preserving your emotional energy, relationships, and personal well-being simultaneously. Ambiguity Amplification. There's something uniquely fascinating about mysteries, stories with open endings, unresolved questions, or secrets hidden just out of reach. They captivate us precisely because our minds naturally crave closure and certainty. Yet, paradoxically, it's the very absence of complete clarity, the deliberate ambiguity, that keeps us irresistibly hooked, constantly curious, and deeply engaged. This intriguing psychological principle, where uncertainty intensifies interest and curiosity, is known as ambiguity amplification. Ambiguity amplification is the deliberate psychological trick of introducing subtle uncertainty, mystery, or open-endedness into communication to heighten attention, curiosity, and emotional investment, rather than providing exhaustive explanations, detailed clarity, or full resolutions immediately. Ambiguity amplification strategically leaves crucial details, say, unexplained, inviting the mind to fill in gaps, speculate, and obsessively ponder possibilities. But why does ambiguity so powerfully capture our attention? The answer lies deep in human psychology. Our brains are hardwired to seek understanding, completion, and certainty. When information is deliberately incomplete or subtly unclear, the mind instinctively attempts to resolve that ambiguity. We actively imagine possibilities, speculate about hidden meanings, and replay uncertain details repeatedly. This mental process makes ambiguous situations feel profoundly interesting, memorable, and emotionally engaging, far more so than perfectly clear or complete information could ever be. Consider an example involving storytelling. A novelist could easily reveal every secret about a character's past up front, clearly explaining all motivations, relationships, and hidden intentions. Yet, this perfect clarity removes the essential emotional tension and curiosity that keeps readers hooked. Instead, by carefully amplifying ambiguity, revealing only hints, subtle suggestions, or incomplete explanations, the author compels readers to continue turning pages obsessively, desperate to resolve unanswered questions, clarify mysterious motives, and uncover hidden secrets. Similarly, marketers skillfully exploit ambiguity amplification to generate attention, buzz, and excitement. Imagine a teaser trailer for an anticipated movie, carefully revealing only brief glimpses, tantalizing hints, and deliberately unclear plot points. This subtle ambiguity amplifies curiosity dramatically, compelling audiences to speculate excitedly about details, eagerly awaiting complete revelations. Ambiguity amplification isn't limited to storytelling or marketing. It's incredibly effective in everyday communication as well. Suppose you're presenting an idea at work. Rather than immediately providing every detail explicitly, you strategically introduce subtle ambiguity, sharing only intriguing glimpses initially. Listeners' minds naturally engage deeply, asking questions, expressing curiosity, and emotionally investing themselves to uncover more. You've skillfully amplified their interest simply through the careful use of ambiguity. But mastering ambiguity, amplification requires subtlety, timing, and intuition. Too little ambiguity provides insufficient intrigue, while excessive ambiguity quickly becomes frustrating or confusing. Effective ambiguity carefully balances uncertainty with hints, suggestions, and subtle clues, inviting active mental engagement without overwhelming confusion. Practicing ambiguity, amplification profoundly enhances your communication, influence, and persuasion abilities. It transforms routine conversations into captivating interactions, mundane explanations into intriguing narratives, and ordinary presentations into unforgettable experiences. Your words become irresistibly fascinating precisely because they leave space for imagination, speculation, and active mental engagement. To apply ambiguity, amplification effectively, consciously introduce deliberate uncertainty into your communication, offer subtle hints, suggest possibilities without immediate explanations, and strategically leave certain details incomplete or open-ended. Your audience naturally becomes curious, emotionally invested, and deeply attentive, instinctively seeking resolution or understanding. Ambiguity, amplification leverages one of humanity's most powerful psychological drives, the irresistible craving for clarity and completion. By carefully and strategically withholding perfect certainty, you transform ordinary communication into deeply compelling, memorable, and emotionally engaging experiences. Embrace ambiguity deliberately, and you'll captivate listeners effortlessly, turning routine interactions into profound connections, irresistible mysteries, and unforgettable moments of shared curiosity. Loss aversion leverage. Imagine you find a $100 bill on the sidewalk. You'd feel pretty good, right? But now, imagine you lose that exact same $100 bill from your wallet. The emotional impact feels significantly stronger, doesn't it? In fact, the pain of losing something often feels twice as powerful as the joy of gaining that same thing. This intriguing psychological phenomenon is called loss aversion, and knowing how to strategically harness this instinct can dramatically amplify your persuasive power. This trick is known as loss aversion leverage. Loss aversion describes our natural tendency to strongly prefer avoiding losses over acquiring equivalent gains. Simply put, humans are hardwired to fear loss more intensely than they value potential benefits. This profound psychological insight was famously demonstrated by psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, who found that losses psychologically impact us at least twice as intensely as equivalent gains. Loss aversion leverage strategically uses this innate psychological bias to influence decisions, motivate actions, and drive behaviors. By framing opportunities, proposals, or decisions in terms of potential losses rather than potential gains, you tap into a powerful emotional instinct, making your message instantly more compelling, urgent, and persuasive. Consider an example involving personal fitness goals. Suppose someone has set an ambitious goal to exercise regularly. If they focus solely on potential benefits, feeling healthier, improving appearance, gaining strength, they might quickly lose motivation or discipline. After all, these potential rewards feel abstract, distant, and emotionally less powerful. However, by employing loss aversion leverage, they deliberately shift their mental framing, vividly focusing instead on potential losses, the pain of deteriorating health, lost vitality, decreased self-esteem, or missed life opportunities if they fail to maintain fitness goals. Instantly, motivation and discipline dramatically increase because avoiding painful losses naturally engages stronger emotional reactions than pursuing equivalent benefits ever could. This trick proves similarly effective in professional or business scenarios. Suppose a company wants employees to embrace a significant operational change. Traditionally, leadership might emphasize the change's potential benefits: improve productivity, enhance efficiency, increase profitability. While logical, this framing often fails to ignite powerful motivation. Alternatively, by strategically employing loss aversion leverage, leadership clearly communicates potential losses instead: falling behind competitors, declining market position, financial instability if changes aren't embraced quickly. Employees immediately experience urgency, emotional engagement, and active commitment because loss aversion naturally triggers intense psychological responses. Mastering loss aversion leverage requires subtlety and emotional intelligence. It's not about intentionally creating unnecessary fear or anxiety, but about strategically highlighting real, meaningful consequences of inaction or indecision. Effectively leveraging loss aversion involves clearly communicating potential losses, authentically yet constructively, motivating action positively rather than manipulatively. However, using this trick also requires caution. Overly emphasizing negative consequences excessively can trigger resentment, anxiety, or resistance. Effective loss aversion leverage carefully balances clarity regarding potential losses with constructive guidance toward positive action. Done skillfully, it motivates powerful commitment, engagement, and decision-making without unnecessary emotional distress. Practicing loss aversion leverage profoundly amplifies your persuasive impact, communication effectiveness, and motivational ability. Whether persuading clients, motivating employees, or inspiring personal behavior change, consciously framing opportunities in terms of potential losses rather than gains transforms ordinary messages into irresistibly powerful motivators. You naturally leverage innate psychological instincts, dramatically enhancing emotional engagement, urgency, and response. Next time you want to influence behaviors or decisions, remember the subtle yet potent psychological power of loss aversion leverage. Instead of simply highlighting potential benefits, clearly communicate meaningful potential losses. Instantly, your audience feels emotional intensity, urgency, and powerful motivation, deeply compelled toward action, precisely because their innate psychological instincts are so strongly engaged. Ultimately, understanding and skillfully applying loss aversion leverage allows you to ethically and effectively amplify your influence, persuasion, and motivational impact in every interaction. Temporal discounting override. Right now, you have two choices. You could accept $100 immediately or wait a full year and receive $120 instead. Which would you choose? Most people instinctively grab the immediate reward, even though waiting would yield more money in the long run. This widespread psychological tendency, favoring immediate smaller rewards over larger delayed ones, is known as temporal discounting. But what if you could deliberately override this instinctive urge, shifting your mindset to consistently favor choices that bring far greater long-term rewards? Temporal discounting override is the psychological trick of consciously retraining your brain to prioritize future, delayed rewards rather than automatically succumbing to immediate gratification. It involves mentally reframing choices to vividly emphasize future benefits, effectively reducing impulsive short-term decision-making. By intentionally shifting your mental perspective, you overcome the instinctive urge for immediate satisfaction, dramatically increasing self-control, patience, and the ability to consistently make wiser long-term decisions. But why do our brains naturally discount future rewards, even when logically those rewards clearly outweigh immediate options? The answer lies deep in our evolutionary history. Our ancestors faced uncertainty daily, their survival often dependent on immediate access to resources like food, shelter, and safety. As a result, our brains evolved to strongly prefer immediate guaranteed rewards, subconsciously devaluing anything uncertain or distant in time. Today, this deeply ingrained instinct often causes impulsive, short-sighted decisions, undermining our long-term goals and overall well-being. Consider an example involving health and fitness. Suppose someone wants to lose weight and become healthier, recognizing that consistent exercise and healthy eating yield immense long-term benefits. However, when faced with tempting immediate choices, indulging in unhealthy food, skipping workouts for comfort or convenience, their brain instinctively discounts the distant reward of future health, instead prioritizing immediate pleasure. Without overriding temporal discounting, short-term impulses dominate, sabotaging progress toward important long-term goals. Temporal discounting override changes this dynamic entirely. Rather than passively accepting impulsive instincts, this trick involves vividly visualizing future benefits as clearly and emotionally as possible. You consciously shift mental focus, imagining yourself experiencing profound satisfaction, pride, and happiness upon achieving long-term goals. You picture yourself feeling vibrant, energized, and healthy months or years into the future, visualizing the emotional and physical rewards vividly and emotionally. This intense future visualization reduces the allure of immediate impulses dramatically, enabling disciplined, patient decision-making consistently aligned with long-term objectives. Imagine a young professional facing a career decision. She could immediately accept a tempting new job, offering instant gratification, higher pay, easy tasks, but limited future growth opportunities. Alternatively, she could remain at her current job, investing in challenging projects that offer delayed but substantial long-term career advancement. Initially, immediate gratification strongly tempts her. However, by consciously practicing temporal discounting override, she vividly imagines herself several years ahead, deeply fulfilled by professional achievements, meaningful career advancement, and substantial long-term financial rewards. This vivid future visualization powerfully overrides immediate temptation, enabling her to confidently and patiently make the wiser long-term choice. Practicing temporal discounting override consistently reshapes your mindset, decisions, and overall life outcomes profoundly. Instead of succumbing to impulsive short-term pleasures, your brain becomes naturally oriented toward choices yielding maximum long-term satisfaction, growth, and success. You become increasingly capable of patience, discipline, delayed gratification, and wise long-term decision-making in every aspect of life, health, finances, career, and relationships. To effectively apply this trick, consciously and frequently practice vivid future visualization. Clearly imagine yourself enjoying profound emotional satisfaction, happiness, pride, and rewards upon achieving long-term objectives. Allow these vivid mental images and emotions to override impulsive short-term temptations repeatedly. With consistent practice, your brain gradually rewires itself, significantly diminishing impulsive short-sightedness and amplifying wise, patient, future-oriented thinking. Temporal discounting override empowers you to overcome instinctive psychological limitations, consciously reshaping your brain to consistently prioritize long-term satisfaction, success, and profound personal fulfillment. Rather than impulsively grabbing short-term rewards, you strategically invest in delayed gratification, confidently making decisions today that yield maximum future happiness, growth, and overall life satisfaction. False choice framing. Imagine sitting down at a restaurant and your server offers you two dessert options. a rich chocolate cake or a creamy cheesecake. You choose confidently, enjoying your decision. But did you ever stop to consider that the server subtly guided your choice, limiting your selection to these two options, even though other desserts might have existed? This powerful yet subtle psychological technique, deliberately limiting choices to a few carefully selected options, is known as false choice framing. False choice framing is the psychological trick of presenting people with limited, predetermined options that subtly guide their decisions, making them feel empowered by a sense of choice, yet still steering them toward outcomes you prefer, rather than explicitly forcing a decision or openly restricting freedom. You strategically present a carefully curated set of alternatives, subtly influencing perceptions and increasing the likelihood they'll choose exactly what you desire. But why does false choice framing work so effectively? The answer lies deep within human psychology. People inherently crave autonomy and the sense that they control their own decisions. Yet paradoxically, too many choices can feel overwhelming, causing decision paralysis, confusion, or dissatisfaction. False choice framing brilliantly leverages these instincts, providing limited, manageable alternatives that feel empowering, yet significantly increase the probability they'll select your preferred outcome. Consider a common example in sales. Suppose a salesperson wants customers to select a moderately priced product, knowing higher priced options might discourage immediate purchase, while lower priced options limit profitability. Rather than presenting numerous possibilities simultaneously, overwhelming customers, they strategically use false choice framing, offering precisely three curated options: a premium product priced higher than customers typically choose, a budget option priced lower yet slightly inferior, and the mid-price product they're hoping customers select. By limiting choices this way, customers naturally gravitate toward the moderate option, feeling they've made an empowered decision, unaware the salesperson deliberately guided their choice. Through careful framing, false choice framing also works powerfully in personal interactions. Imagine a parent hoping their child eats healthily, rather than openly demanding the child eats vegetables, likely causing resistance. They strategically frame the choice between two healthy options. Would you prefer carrots or broccoli tonight? The child feels empowered, happily choosing their preferred vegetable. They've willingly selected a healthy choice, unaware the parent subtly controlled available options, successfully influencing behavior positively without conflict or resistance. Mastering false choice framing requires emotional intelligence, subtlety, and careful preparation. Effective framing involves selecting a small, carefully curated set of options, typically 2 or 3, where your preferred outcome appears most attractive or reasonable. You strategically structure choices to guide perception subtly, increasing the likelihood they'll choose your desired option willingly and enthusiastically, believing they've independently selected the best possible outcome. However, this trick also requires caution. Overly obvious or restrictive framing can feel manipulative, triggering suspicion or resistance. Effective false choice framing carefully balances subtlety, empowerment, and gentle psychological influence. Done skillfully, it allows you to positively shape decisions without sacrificing trust, autonomy, or genuine empowerment. Consistently practicing false choice framing profoundly enhances your persuasive effectiveness, communication skills, and interpersonal influence. Whether negotiating professionally, parenting effectively, or influencing socially, carefully limiting choices subtly yet strategically transforms ordinary interactions into influential opportunities, effortlessly guiding others toward outcomes beneficial for everyone involved. Next time you aim to subtly influence behavior or decisions, remember the remarkable psychological power of false choice framing. Instead of overwhelming others with too many choices or forcing a specific decision directly, Strategically, curate a few carefully selected options. Your audience instinctively feels empowered, eagerly selecting among the presented possibilities, unaware you've skillfully guided their choice from the start. Ultimately, mastering false choice framing empowers you to ethically and effortlessly amplify influence, persuasion, and positive behavioral outcomes in every interaction. Fear neutralization. Fear has an uncanny power to paralyze us, doesn't it? The racing heartbeat, the sweaty palms, and the overwhelming sense of dread can sabotage performance, undermine confidence, and prevent us from taking essential actions. Yet imagine if there were a simple, yet incredibly effective psychological trick that could instantly neutralize fear, transforming anxiety into genuine strength and empowerment. This remarkable psychological method is known as fear neutralization. Fear neutralization is the powerful psychological trick of consciously reframing fear as excitement or anticipation, effectively transforming debilitating anxiety into empowering emotional energy. Rather than attempting to suppress, avoid, or deny fear, which typically increases its intensity, you deliberately and immediately label your anxious feelings as excitement, vividly embracing anticipation rather than dread. This subtle yet powerful shift in perception dramatically alters your emotional state, performance, and psychological experience of challenging situations. But why does fear neutralization work so effectively? The answer lies in the surprising physiological similarity between fear and excitement. Both emotions trigger remarkably similar bodily responses: increased heart rate, adrenaline release, heightened alertness, and emotional intensity. Crucially, the psychological difference between fear and excitement lies primarily in mental interpretation and labeling rather than physical sensations themselves. Fear neutralization skillfully exploits this psychological insight. By consciously and intentionally labeling physical sensations associated with fear as excitement, you literally transform anxiety's psychological impact, instantly replacing dread with positive anticipation, eagerness, and empowering energy. Consider a common scenario involving public speaking, one of humanity's most widespread fears. Suppose Emma faces an important presentation. Initially, anxiety overwhelms her: rapid heartbeat, sweaty palms, racing thoughts. Typically, these sensations intensify fear, damaging confidence, performance, and emotional state. Instead, Emma deliberately practices fear neutralization. Rather than passively accepting fear, she consciously relabels physical sensations, saying to herself repeatedly, "I'm excited. I'm genuinely excited about this opportunity." Instantly, anxiety transforms psychologically into excitement. Her heart races, but now from eagerness. Adrenaline flows, but as an energy-fueling, confident delivery. Emma's emotional state dramatically improves, profoundly enhancing performance, emotional experience, and audience impact, all simply through intentional fear reframing. Fear neutralization similarly transforms countless scenarios: job interviews, athletic competitions, social events, negotiations, virtually any situation provoking anxiety or fear. Instead of passively allowing anxiety to control outcomes, this trick empowers immediate psychological transformation, dramatically enhancing confidence, performance, resilience, and emotional experiences. Interestingly, scientific studies confirm fear neutralization's remarkable effectiveness. Researchers at Harvard found participants who consciously labeled anxiety as excitement before stressful tasks, public speaking, math tests, negotiations, consistently experienced significantly better emotional states, higher confidence, improved performance, and decreased negative psychological impacts compared to control groups who attempted traditional anxiety suppression techniques. Simply reframing fear transformed their psychological experiences, performance, and emotional states profoundly. Mastering fear, neutralization requires deliberate, conscious practice. Whenever anxiety or fear arises, immediately label physical sensations consciously and vividly as excitement. Repeat empowering statements internally. I'm excited. I'm genuinely looking forward to this. Allow these intentional statements to instantly transform your psychological experience, emotional state, and performance positively. However, effective fear neutralization also involves genuine emotional commitment. Merely repeating words mechanically lacks psychological impact. You must vividly and authentically embrace excitement and anticipation emotionally, deliberately allowing positive energy to replace anxiety's previous negative psychological impacts. Consistently practicing fear neutralization profoundly enhances emotional resilience, performance under pressure, psychological confidence, and overall emotional health. Anxiety transforms from debilitating enemy into empowering ally. Emotional energy fueling extraordinary confidence, resilience, and positive outcomes across life's most challenging scenarios. Next time fear or anxiety arises, remember fear neutralization's incredible psychological power. Rather than passively accepting anxiety's damaging impacts, consciously reframe physical sensations as genuine excitement. Instantly, anxiety transforms into empowering anticipation, dramatically enhancing your emotional state, confidence, resilience, and performance. Ultimately, mastering fear neutralization allows you to harness anxiety's energy positively, profoundly transforming your psychological experience, emotional health, and overall life outcomes effortlessly. Reverse psychology, precision. Everyone knows the story. A child refuses to eat vegetables, stubbornly pushing the plate away. The parent cleverly announces with feigned surrender, "Okay, you're right. Vegetables aren't for you. You probably wouldn't like them anyway." Immediately, the child bristles with defiance, suddenly eager to prove the parent wrong, grabbing the broccoli and eating it triumphantly. What just happened? The parent masterfully applied reverse psychology precision, a subtle yet powerful trick that harnesses our instinctive desire to assert autonomy and independence. Reverse psychology precision involves strategically advocating for the opposite of your actual desire, carefully framing suggestions or requests in a way that triggers natural psychological resistance. Instead of openly pressuring someone to comply, a strategy that often generates stubborn defiance, you skillfully present the exact opposite of your true objective. Knowing human beings instinctively rebel against perceived attempts at restricting their freedom or autonomy. When someone feels their freedom threatened, even slightly, they subconsciously resist by actively doing precisely the opposite of what they perceive you want. But why does reverse psychology work so effectively, especially when applied precisely and carefully? The answer lies in psychological reactance, our natural instinctive response to protect autonomy when freedom feels threatened. Humans deeply value independence and personal choice, and our subconscious minds continuously monitor for any attempts at controlling behavior or decisions. Even subtle suggestions perceived as manipulative can trigger reactance, motivating active defiance and resistance, even toward actions otherwise beneficial or reasonable. Reverse psychology precision skillfully exploits this natural psychological instinct, deliberately triggering reactance to subtly guide someone toward your genuine objective. Imagine an example involving workplace productivity. Suppose a manager notices employees resist attending voluntary weekly training sessions designed to improve their skills. Previously, directly encouraging attendance triggered stubborn avoidance. Instead, the manager carefully employs reverse psychology precision, calmly announcing, I realize these trainings might not be useful to everyone, and not everyone is ready to handle the extra skills right now. It's perfectly fine if you prefer not attending. Immediately, employees sense subtle psychological pressure against attendance, instinctively feeling their professional autonomy challenged. Reactance kicks in, and attendance naturally increases. Employees voluntarily proving their capability, independence, and commitment, precisely because the manager skillfully implied the opposite. Reverse psychology. Precision also proves incredibly effective in personal relationships. Imagine Sarah, frustrated because her partner, Jake, consistently refuses help with chores. Previously, openly asking or demanding assistance created stubborn resistance. Instead, Sarah carefully applies reverse psychology precision. You know what, Jake? Maybe you're right. Maybe chores just aren't your thing. I'll handle everything myself from now on. Jake immediately feels subtle psychological resistance triggered, instinctively eager to prove his capability, reliability, and independence. Rather than stubborn refusal, he enthusiastically begins assisting with chores voluntarily, eager to disprove Sarah's subtle implication. Mastering reverse psychology. Precision requires subtlety, emotional intelligence, and psychological awareness. Effective use involves carefully implying, not openly demanding, the opposite of your actual desire. The framing must genuinely feel authentic and non-manipulative, allowing natural psychological reactance to trigger voluntary compliance subtly yet powerfully. However, reverse psychology also demands caution. Overuse or obvious manipulation quickly triggers suspicion or resentment. Effective reverse psychology. Precision involves careful timing, genuine subtlety, and emotional authenticity, ensuring reactance feels natural rather than manipulated. Done skillfully, it dramatically amplifies persuasive impact, relationship harmony, and positive behavioral outcomes without sacrificing trust or autonomy. Next time direct persuasion fails, remember the extraordinary psychological power of reverse psychology precision. Instead of openly pressuring or demanding compliance, triggering stubborn defiance, carefully suggest or imply the opposite of your true objective. Instantly, subtle psychological reactance motivates others toward precisely the action you genuinely desire, willingly and enthusiastically, believing they've independently chosen it. Ultimately, mastering reverse psychology. Precision empowers subtle yet profoundly effective psychological influence, dramatically enhancing your persuasive abilities, emotional intelligence, and interpersonal effectiveness across all life scenarios. Priming patience. Patience, it's often called a virtue, yet frequently feels nearly impossible to maintain. We've all been there, caught in traffic, standing in endless lines, or waiting anxiously for an important call, feeling irritation slowly rising until patience completely vanishes. But what if there was a powerful psychological trick capable of instantly increasing your patience levels simply by priming your subconscious mind? This remarkable mental strategy is called priming patience, and mastering it can dramatically transform your emotional resilience, stress levels, and overall psychological health. Priming patience involves deliberately influencing your subconscious mind to feel calmer, more resilient, and significantly more patient by intentionally surrounding yourself with specific cues, images, or words associated with patience and calmness. Human minds naturally respond strongly to subtle subconscious priming, small stimuli, often unnoticed consciously, yet powerfully shaping emotional responses, behaviors, and mindset. By strategically priming your subconscious repeatedly, you dramatically enhance patience, emotional control, and mental resilience in challenging situations. But why does priming patience hold such extraordinary power? The answer lies in how subtly yet profoundly our subconscious minds influence behavior and emotions. Our conscious minds typically assume they control decisions, reactions, and emotional responses, yet studies repeatedly demonstrate our subconscious minds powerfully influence emotional states and reactions, often more profoundly than conscious intentions. Subtle subconscious cues, images, words, symbols, shape emotional responses automatically, activating emotional associations deeply embedded in memory. Priming patients skillfully leverages these subconscious processes, repeatedly exposing the mind to calming, patient, emotionally positive stimuli. Gradually, your subconscious mind internalizes patience deeply, dramatically transforming emotional responses automatically. Consider an example involving stressful daily commuting. Imagine Michael, whose daily commute consistently triggers impatience, stress, and emotional turmoil. Typically, Michael struggles unsuccessfully to remain patient consciously, inevitably overwhelmed emotionally. Instead, Michael deliberately practices priming patience. Before commuting, he consciously surrounds himself briefly with images or words subconsciously associated with patience and calmness. Peaceful landscapes, serene quotes, soothing music. Initially, the impact feels subtle, almost unnoticed consciously, yet gradually, Michael's subconscious mind internalizes these calming cues deeply. Over time, Michael's emotional reactions transform dramatically. Impatience reduces significantly, emotional resilience strengthens profoundly, and commuting stress decreases noticeably, all simply through intentional subconscious priming. Priming patience similarly transforms countless scenarios: stressful workplaces, challenging relationships, difficult negotiations, social anxiety, virtually any situation requiring emotional control, patience, and resilience. Instead of passively allowing impatience to dominate emotional responses, this trick empowers immediate subconscious transformation, dramatically enhancing patience automatically and effortlessly. Interestingly, scientific studies confirm subconscious priming's remarkable psychological impact. Researchers at New York University found participants briefly exposed subconsciously to calming, patient-related words or images consistently displayed significantly increased emotional control, patience, and resilience during subsequent stressful tasks compared to control groups. Simply priming subconscious minds briefly, yet repeatedly, dramatically transformed emotional experiences, behaviors, and psychological resilience. Mastering priming patience requires deliberate, conscious practice. Surround yourself briefly yet repeatedly with calming, patient stimuli, peaceful images, serene quotes, soothing sounds, especially before anticipated stressful situations. Gradually, your subconscious mind internalizes these calming cues deeply, automatically enhancing emotional control, resilience, and patience dramatically. However, effective priming also involves genuine emotional engagement. Merely passively viewing calming stimuli without emotional connection lacks psychological impact. Effective priming patience requires vividly experiencing associated emotions authentically, allowing your subconscious mind to internalize calming associations deeply and powerfully. Consistently practicing priming patience profoundly enhances emotional resilience, psychological control, mental health, and overall life quality. Impatience transforms into patience effortlessly. Emotional control becomes instinctive, resilience strengthens dramatically, and stress reduces profoundly across life's most challenging scenarios. Next time patience feels challenging, remember the subtle yet extraordinary psychological power of priming patience. Rather than struggling consciously, deliberately prime your subconscious mind repeatedly with calming, patient associations. Instantly, emotional responses transform automatically. Impatience reduces significantly, emotional resilience strengthens profoundly, and psychological health dramatically improves. Ultimately, mastering priming patience allows subconscious emotional control effortlessly, profoundly transforming your psychological resilience, patience levels, and overall life experiences positively and automatically. Mirror exposure method. Think about the first time you heard a new song. Perhaps initially it didn't appeal to you. You might have found it strange, unfamiliar, or even slightly annoying. But after hearing it repeatedly over days or weeks, suddenly you catch yourself humming along, enjoying it, and even calling it your favorite. What changed? The song itself remained the same, but repeated exposure subtly and powerfully transformed your emotional response. This fascinating psychological phenomenon, where repeated exposure gradually increases familiarity, liking, and emotional attachment, is called the mirror exposure method. The mirror exposure method is the deliberate psychological trick of repeatedly exposing yourself or others to something unfamiliar or initially uncomfortable, gradually increasing comfort, acceptance, and emotional positivity simply through repetition. Human minds naturally prefer familiarity, instinctively associating repeated exposure with safety, positivity, and emotional security. By strategically repeating exposure to certain stimuli, ideas, experiences, people, objects, you subtly yet powerfully shift emotional reactions from initial discomfort toward genuine familiarity, liking, and acceptance. But why does repeated exposure hold such profound psychological influence? The answer lies deep within evolutionary psychology. Throughout human history, familiarity consistently signaled safety and survival. Anything unfamiliar represented potential threats, new environments, unfamiliar individuals, unusual foods. Gradually, our brains evolved to instinctively prefer familiarity strongly, associating repeated exposure subconsciously with safety, positivity, and emotional trust. The mirror exposure method strategically leverages these deeply ingrained psychological instincts. By repeatedly exposing minds subconsciously, yet consistently, to initially unfamiliar or uncomfortable stimuli, emotional reactions gradually shift positively, profoundly increasing liking, comfort, and acceptance. Consider an example involving public speaking anxiety, a common fear. Suppose Rachel initially feels deeply uncomfortable speaking publicly, consistently avoiding opportunities despite potential career growth. Rather than forcing herself into overwhelming anxiety immediately, Rachel deliberately employs the mirror exposure method. She repeatedly and consistently practices short, low-pressure speaking scenarios privately, perhaps initially just reading aloud in a mirror repeatedly, then gradually speaking in front of one or two supportive friends. Initially, Rachel's anxiety remains, but crucially, repeated exposure gradually reduces emotional discomfort, steadily increasing comfort and acceptance subconsciously. Eventually, Rachel confidently and comfortably speaks publicly, profoundly empowered simply through repeated, strategic exposure. The mirror exposure method similarly transforms countless scenarios, overcoming social anxiety, embracing healthier eating habits, adopting exercise routines, accepting cultural differences. Virtually any situation initially uncomfortable yet beneficial long-term. Rather than passively accepting initial emotional discomfort, this trick deliberately employs repeated exposure, subtly yet profoundly shifting subconscious emotional reactions positively. Interestingly, numerous scientific studies confirm repeated exposure's remarkable psychological influence. Researchers consistently demonstrate that repeated exposure significantly increases liking, comfort, and acceptance across diverse stimuli, people, objects, ideas, compared to limited exposure. Simply repeating exposure subtly yet powerfully transforms subconscious emotional reactions, dramatically increasing positivity, familiarity, and genuine acceptance. Mastering the mirror exposure method requires patience, consistency, and emotional awareness. Effective use involves repeatedly yet gradually exposing minds subconsciously to initially uncomfortable stimuli, consistently, strategically, and incrementally increasing familiarity and comfort subconsciously. Crucially, effective exposure initially feels slightly uncomfortable, yet never overwhelming, gradually increasing intensity only as emotional comfort improves genuinely. However, effective repeated exposure also requires genuine emotional engagement. Merely mechanically repeating exposure without emotional authenticity lacks psychological impact. Effective mirror exposure method deliberately embraces subtle initial discomfort, genuinely yet patiently, gradually shifting emotional reactions positively through consistent, repeated exposure strategically. Consistently practicing the mirror exposure method profoundly enhances emotional comfort, psychological flexibility, and resilience across life's diverse challenges. Initial discomfort transforms gradually yet profoundly into familiarity, acceptance, and emotional positivity. Anxiety reduces significantly, emotional resilience strengthens powerfully, and genuine comfort increases dramatically across previously uncomfortable scenarios. Next time something beneficial yet initially uncomfortable arises, social situations, healthy habits, challenging experiences, remember the extraordinary psychological power of repeated exposure. Deliberately and repeatedly expose your subconscious mind incrementally yet consistently. Gradually yet profoundly, your subconscious emotional reactions transform. Initial discomfort reduces dramatically, genuine familiarity increases profoundly, and emotional acceptance strengthens powerfully. Ultimately, mastering the mirror exposure method empowers you psychologically, subtly yet profoundly transforming emotional reactions, resilience, comfort levels, and overall life experiences positively and automatically. Compliance through touch. You're at a restaurant and the waiter gently touches your shoulder while recommending a special dessert. Somehow, that simple casual gesture makes you feel warmer toward the suggestion. Without fully understanding why, you find yourself ordering that very dessert. Later, reflecting on it, you wonder, was it the touch that influenced your decision? Remarkably, subtle physical contact often has a profound psychological effect, dramatically increasing trust, agreement, and compliance in countless scenarios. This intriguing psychological trick is known as compliance through touch. Compliance through touch involves strategically using subtle, appropriate physical contact, like gently touching an arm or shoulder, to significantly enhance agreement, cooperation, and positive responses during interactions. Humans instinctively respond powerfully, yet subconsciously, to gentle physical touch, interpreting it as warmth, trustworthiness, empathy, and emotional connection. Even brief, subtle contact dramatically increases positive feelings, agreement, and compliance, profoundly influencing decisions, cooperation levels, and relationship quality subconsciously. But why does simple physical touch profoundly increase compliance? The answer lies deep in human evolutionary psychology. Throughout history, gentle physical contact consistently communicated trust, affection, safety, and emotional bonds. Our brains evolved instinctively, associating gentle touch positively, powerfully signaling social connection, support, and emotional warmth. Even subtle, brief physical contact subconsciously triggers profound psychological reactions, significantly increasing positive feelings, cooperation, trust, and compliance automatically. Consider an example involving sales scenarios. Suppose a salesperson hopes customers will agree to make larger purchases. Previously, simply verbally encouraging customers often generated resistance or hesitation. Instead, the salesperson strategically employs compliance through touch. While explaining options, they briefly and appropriately touch customers' arms or shoulders, gently yet naturally. Immediately, customers subconsciously experience increased warmth, trust, and emotional connection, dramatically enhancing their likelihood of positively responding, cooperating, and agreeing to larger purchases, often without consciously realizing the subtle influence physical touch provided. Similarly, imagine a manager hoping employees willingly embrace significant operational changes. Typically, openly announcing changes triggered resistance, complaints, or stubborn hesitation. Instead, the manager carefully employs compliance through touch. While individually discussing upcoming changes privately, the manager subtly touches employees' arms reassuringly, briefly yet gently. Immediately, employees subconsciously experience increased trust, warmth, and emotional connection. Resistance significantly reduces, cooperation dramatically increases, and employees willingly embrace changes enthusiastically, believing they've independently chosen agreement. Unaware, subtle physical touch profoundly influenced their responses. However, mastering compliance through touch requires emotional intelligence, awareness, and careful boundaries. Effective use involves subtle, brief, gentle physical contact, typically arms, shoulders, hands, naturally and authentically integrated into interactions. Touch must consistently feel genuinely supportive, empathetic, and socially appropriate, subtly enhancing trust, warmth, and compliance subconsciously rather than triggering discomfort or suspicion. Interestingly, numerous scientific studies consistently confirm gentle physical touches' remarkable psychological impact. Researchers repeatedly demonstrate brief, subtle touch significantly increases compliance, cooperation, positive emotions, and relationship quality compared to interactions without physical contact. Even seemingly minor gestures, briefly touching an arm or shoulder, dramatically transform emotional reactions subconsciously, profoundly increasing agreement, trust, and cooperation automatically and effortlessly. Yet, effective compliance through touch demands genuine emotional authenticity. Mechanically or manipulatively employing physical contact quickly triggers suspicion, discomfort, or resistance. Effective touch genuinely and subtly conveys warmth, empathy, trust, and emotional support authentically, allowing subconscious emotional reactions to naturally increase positive feelings and compliance significantly. Practicing compliance through touch profoundly enhances influence, persuasion, relationship quality, cooperation, and emotional connection across countless scenarios: sales, negotiations, leadership, relationships. Subtle physical contact powerfully and subconsciously transforms emotional reactions positively, dramatically, increasing agreement, trust, compliance, and cooperation automatically. Next time you hope others willingly and positively cooperate, making purchases, embracing changes, agreeing enthusiastically, remember gentle physical touches, extraordinary psychological power. Rather than solely relying on verbal persuasion or encouragement, integrate subtle, appropriate physical contact naturally into interactions. Instantly, subconscious minds instinctively respond positively, dramatically increasing agreement, compliance, cooperation, and emotional connection effortlessly and profoundly. Ultimately, mastering compliance through touch empowers subtle yet profound psychological influence, significantly enhancing interpersonal effectiveness, emotional intelligence, persuasive abilities, and relationship quality positively, naturally, and effortlessly. Authenticity illusion. Imagine meeting someone for the first time. They immediately disclose minor vulnerabilities or imperfections about themselves, openly sharing stories of occasional mistakes or small flaws. Strangely enough, instead of feeling cautious or wary, you feel yourself drawn toward them, instinctively liking and trusting them more deeply. What just happened? Without realizing it, you've experienced the powerful psychological trick known as the authenticity illusion. The authenticity illusion is the deliberate psychological trick of strategically revealing minor imperfections, vulnerabilities, or mistakes to dramatically increase perceived authenticity, trustworthiness, and likability. Contrary to instinctively hiding imperfections, assuming flawless perfection generates maximum trust. This trick carefully reveals small vulnerabilities, subtly communicating honesty, relatability, and genuine humanity. Interestingly, even minor vulnerability disclosures profoundly enhance perceptions of authenticity, trust, and emotional connection subconsciously. But why does openly revealing imperfections dramatically enhance authenticity perceptions? The answer lies deep within human psychology. Our minds instinctively mistrust perfection, unconsciously interpreting flawless appearances or behaviors suspiciously as potentially manipulative, deceptive, or emotionally distant. Conversely, openly revealing minor vulnerabilities powerfully signals honesty, emotional openness, and genuine humanity subconsciously. Our brains automatically associate vulnerability with emotional authenticity, dramatically increasing trust, emotional connection, and genuine liking. Consider an example involving public speaking scenarios. Suppose Jacob presents an important proposal at work. Initially, he attempts flawless perfection, carefully rehearsing repeatedly, ensuring no mistakes or imperfections emerge publicly. Surprisingly, despite technical excellence, audiences remain emotionally detached, subconsciously suspicious of overly polished perfection. Instead, Jacob deliberately employs the authenticity illusion. At the presentation's outset, he openly acknowledges minor nervousness humorously. "I'll admit, I practice this endlessly because I always feel slightly nervous speaking publicly." Immediately, audiences subconsciously perceive genuine authenticity, emotional honesty, and relatable humanity, dramatically increasing trust, emotional connection, and engagement significantly. Jacob's deliberate yet genuine vulnerability profoundly enhances audience responses positively and powerfully. Similarly, authenticity illusion transforms interpersonal relationships powerfully. Imagine Ava initially dating someone new. Typically, people instinctively hide imperfections, presenting flawless appearances, hoping perfection maximizes likability and trust. Surprisingly, however, flawless perfection often generates subconscious suspicion or emotional distance, preventing genuine emotional connection. Instead, Ava strategically employs the authenticity illusion. During early dates, she openly yet humorously acknowledges minor imperfections, perhaps admitting playfully, "I'll warn you, I'm honestly terrible at cooking," rather than decreasing trust or attraction. This minor vulnerability revelation dramatically increases emotional connection, authenticity perceptions, and genuine attraction. Ava's deliberate yet genuine authenticity profoundly enhances relationship, intimacy, trust, and genuine emotional bonding effortlessly and powerfully. Interestingly, numerous psychological studies confirm minor vulnerability disclosures significantly increase perceived authenticity, trustworthiness, emotional connection, and likability compared to flawless perfection presentations. Even subtle minor vulnerability revelations powerfully signal subconscious authenticity, honesty, and relatable humanity, profoundly enhancing positive emotional responses automatically and effortlessly. Mastering the authenticity. Illusion requires emotional intelligence, genuine subtlety, and strategic timing. Effective use involves deliberately yet genuinely revealing minor imperfections or vulnerabilities, typically humorous, relatable, or insignificant, naturally integrated into interactions. Crucially, effective vulnerability revelations consistently remain minor and genuinely relatable, never overwhelming or uncomfortable, subtly yet powerfully enhancing authenticity perceptions subconsciously and automatically. However, effective vulnerability disclosure demands genuine emotional authenticity. Merely mechanically or manipulatively revealing imperfections quickly triggers subconscious suspicion or discomfort. Effective authenticity, illusion deliberately and genuinely embraces relatable imperfections authentically, allowing subconscious minds to naturally perceive genuine emotional honesty, authenticity, and relatable humanity powerfully and positively. Consistently practicing authenticity, illusion profoundly enhances interpersonal effectiveness, emotional intelligence, persuasive abilities, relationship intimacy, and emotional connections significantly. Subtle vulnerability revelations subconsciously transform emotional reactions profoundly, dramatically increasing authenticity perceptions, emotional trust, genuine attraction, and relationship intimacy effortlessly and powerfully. Next time building trust, emotional connection, or likability feels challenging, remember minor vulnerability disclosures' extraordinary psychological power. Rather than instinctively hiding imperfections, assuming flawless perfection generates maximum positivity. Deliberately, yet genuinely, reveal relatable imperfections authentically. Instantly, subconscious minds instinctively perceive genuine emotional honesty, authenticity, and relatable humanity, powerfully, dramatically enhancing trust, emotional connections, and genuine relationships effortlessly and positively. Ultimately, mastering authenticity illusion empowers subtle yet profound psychological influence, significantly enhancing emotional intelligence, interpersonal effectiveness, persuasive abilities, and genuine relationship quality powerfully, naturally, and authentically. Peek and rule. Think back to your last vacation. What do you remember most vividly? Chances are it's not every minute detail, rather, it's specific standout moments, perhaps that stunning sunset on your final evening or the surprise upgrade to your hotel room. Curiously, even if parts of your trip were stressful or tedious, your overall memory of the vacation remains overwhelmingly positive because of these special moments. This intriguing psychological phenomenon where our memories focus disproportionately on peak emotional experiences and endings is known as the peak-end rule. The peak-end rule describes our brain's natural tendency to evaluate past experiences based primarily on two key moments: the emotional peak, the most intense part, whether positive or negative, and the ending, how an experience concludes. Remarkably, our overall memories and evaluations of experiences aren't determined by their entire duration or total sum of emotional highs and lows. Instead, our minds instinctively focus intensely on these peak and concluding moments, disproportionately shaping our emotional memories, satisfaction, and future decisions. But why does the peak-end rule influence our memories and emotions so profoundly? The answer lies within cognitive psychology. Human brains are incredibly efficient yet limited processors of information and experiences. Rather than meticulously remembering every detail equally, our minds instinctively simplify experiences into emotional highlights, prioritizing intense emotional moments and endings, instantly embedding these vividly into memory. When recalling past events, we subconsciously rely heavily upon these emotional peaks and conclusions to evaluate overall satisfaction, happiness, and emotional meaning, significantly influencing future decisions, behaviors, and emotional well-being. Consider an example involving customer service interactions. Suppose Emma visits a restaurant where her overall experience is initially mediocre. Average food, slow service, uncomfortable seating. Typically, Emma might leave dissatisfied, unlikely to return. Instead, imagine restaurant staff skillfully employing peak-end rule psychology. Toward the end, they unexpectedly offer Emma a complimentary dessert, genuinely apologizing warmly for slow service. This emotional peak, pleasant surprise, and positive ending dramatically reshape Emma's overall memory. Despite initial negatives, Emma vividly remembers the delightful dessert and sincere apology strongly, evaluating her entire experience positively overall, significantly increasing likelihood of returning enthusiastically, solely due to strategic peak-end rule employment. Similarly, peak-end rule profoundly influences medical experiences. Suppose patients undergo uncomfortable medical procedures. Typically, they might avoid future procedures due to unpleasant memories. However, medical professionals strategically improve final moments, perhaps offering patients soothing music, compassionate reassurance, or gentle comfort afterward. Despite earlier discomfort, patients vividly recall final compassionate moments intensely, significantly, evaluating entire experiences positively, overall, dramatically increasing willingness to undergo future beneficial procedures solely due to emotional peak and positive ending. Interestingly, numerous scientific studies confirm peak-end rules' remarkable psychological impact. Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman famously demonstrated that patients undergoing uncomfortable colonoscopies evaluated overall experiences positively if procedures ended gently, despite longer durations of discomfort initially, even extending discomfort mildly, yet improving endings dramatically transformed overall memories, emotional evaluations, and future willingness significantly solely due to peak-end rule psychology. Mastering peak-end rule requires emotional intelligence, awareness, and strategic planning. Effective use involves deliberately enhancing emotional peaks positively, creating memorable, intense emotional highlights, and ensuring experiences conclude positively, emotionally. Whether customer service interactions, interpersonal relationships, professional presentations, or daily experiences, consciously prioritizing emotional peaks and endings profoundly transforms emotional memories, satisfaction, and future behaviors positively and dramatically. However, effective peak-end rule employment demands genuine emotional authenticity. Merely mechanically manipulating emotional peaks or endings quickly triggers suspicion or discomfort. Effective peak-end rule psychology genuinely prioritizes authentic positive emotional moments, sincerely, naturally, enhancing emotional peaks and endings subtly yet powerfully. Consistently practicing peak-end rule psychology profoundly enhances interpersonal effectiveness, emotional intelligence, persuasive abilities, customer satisfaction, relationship quality, and emotional well-being significantly. Subtle yet intentional enhancement of emotional peaks and endings dramatically transforms emotional memories, evaluations, satisfaction, and future decisions positively, automatically, and effortlessly. Next time designing experiences, whether professional, personal, customer-related, or social, remember emotional peaks and endings' extraordinary psychological power. Deliberately enhance emotional intensity positively during key moments and ensure experiences conclude emotionally positively. Instantly, subconscious minds instinctively evaluate overall experiences significantly more positively, dramatically enhancing emotional memories, satisfaction, relationships, and future behaviors effortlessly and powerfully. Ultimately, mastering peak-end rule empowers subtle yet profound psychological influence, significantly enhancing emotional intelligence, interpersonal effectiveness, persuasive abilities, and genuine emotional connection positively, naturally, and powerfully. Embedded command technique. Imagine listening to someone speak, and suddenly, without fully understanding why, you feel compelled to agree, comply, or take action. Their words flow naturally, yet somehow, within ordinary conversation, subtle commands gently influence your subconscious, shaping your reactions effortlessly. This extraordinary psychological trick, skillfully embedding subtle directives within casual language, is known as the embedded command technique. The embedded command technique involves strategically placing subtle, indirect instructions or suggestions within ordinary conversation, subtly influencing listeners' subconscious minds, rather than openly demanding action, which often triggers resistance or suspicion. Embedded commands skillfully deliver subtle directives indirectly, appearing conversationally natural, yet profoundly influencing subconscious reactions, behaviors, and decisions effortlessly and powerfully. But why does subtle embedded language profoundly influence subconscious minds? The answer lies deep within how our brains process language and communication. Humans naturally filter and resist overt, direct instructions instinctively, subconsciously, protecting autonomy and independence. However, indirect suggestions embedded casually within conversational speech bypass conscious resistance effectively, directly influencing subconscious minds powerfully. Our subconscious minds continuously monitor conversational nuances, subtle cues, emotional context, and linguistic patterns, automatically responding instinctively without conscious awareness. Embedded command technique skillfully leverages these subconscious linguistic processing instincts, strategically delivering subtle, indirect instructions, directly influencing subconscious reactions powerfully yet effortlessly. Consider a practical example involving sales or persuasion scenarios. Suppose Michael hopes customers purchase higher-priced products, knowing openly demanding purchases often triggers resistance or suspicion. Instead, Michael skillfully employs embedded command technique conversationally. While describing product features casually, Michael subtly embeds commands indirectly. When you choose this product, you immediately experience remarkable benefits. Imagine yourself enjoying this investment comfortably. Subconsciously, customers instinctively internalize embedded commands. Choose this product, experience remarkable benefits, enjoy comfortably, dramatically increasing subconscious motivation, positive emotional associations, and purchasing likelihood significantly yet effortlessly without conscious awareness of subtle linguistic influence. Similarly, embedded command technique profoundly transforms interpersonal relationships positively. Imagine Sophia hoping her partner willingly supports household chores enthusiastically, knowing direct demands previously generated resistance or complaints. Instead, Sophia strategically employs embedded command technique conversationally. It's amazing how easily you handle chores efficiently. Imagine feeling great whenever you tackle tasks comfortably. Subconsciously, her partner instinctively internalizes embedded commands, handle chores efficiently, feel great tackling tasks, subtly yet powerfully increasing subconscious motivation, emotional positivity, and genuine willingness, significantly yet effortlessly, without consciously realizing subtle linguistic influence, positively transformed behaviors and emotions powerfully. Interestingly, numerous psychological studies consistently confirm subtle, embedded linguistic influence dramatically increases subconscious motivation, emotional positivity, and behavioral compliance compared to direct, overt instructions. Even subtle linguistic shifts, careful word placement, indirect instructions powerfully transform subconscious reactions profoundly, significantly enhancing emotional responses, motivations, behaviors, and decisions automatically yet effortlessly. Mastering embedded command technique requires subtlety, emotional intelligence, and linguistic awareness. Effective use involves strategically placing subtle, indirect commands naturally within ordinary conversational speech casually. Crucially, effective embedded commands consistently remain conversationally subtle yet linguistically clear, gently delivering indirect suggestions subconsciously without triggering conscious resistance or suspicion, powerfully yet effortlessly. However, effective embedded language also demands genuine emotional authenticity. Mechanically or manipulatively employing linguistic techniques quickly triggers subconscious suspicion or discomfort. Effective embedded command technique conversationally delivers genuinely beneficial subconscious suggestions authentically, naturally enhancing subconscious reactions positively, powerfully, and effortlessly. Consistently practicing embedded command technique profoundly enhances persuasive abilities, interpersonal effectiveness, emotional intelligence, relationship harmony, and subconscious influence significantly. Subtle conversational shifts dramatically transform subconscious reactions profoundly, effortlessly, enhancing subconscious motivation, emotional positivity, relationship intimacy, behavioral compliance, and genuine emotional connection automatically and powerfully. Next time seeking persuasive influence, emotional positivity, or behavioral cooperation feels challenging, remember subtle embedded language's extraordinary subconscious power. Rather than openly demanding actions, which often triggers resistance or suspicion, skillfully embed subtle, indirect commands conversationally. Instantly, subconscious minds instinctively respond positively, significantly enhancing subconscious motivation, emotional positivity, behavioral compliance, and genuine emotional connections powerfully yet effortlessly. Ultimately, mastering embedded command technique empowers subtle yet profound subconscious influence, significantly enhancing persuasive abilities, emotional intelligence, interpersonal effectiveness, relationship quality, and genuine emotional connection positively, naturally, effortlessly, and powerfully. Reciprocity Preloading. Picture this scenario. You're shopping and a salesperson hands you a free sample of luxurious chocolate. Moments later, you feel a subtle, nagging urge to buy something from their store, even if you weren't planning to initially. Why did a small, simple gesture of generosity suddenly influence your decision? This fascinating psychological phenomenon, where receiving something first makes you feel instinctively obligated to return the favor, is called reciprocity preloading. Reciprocity preloading involves strategically providing something of genuine value to another person first before asking for anything in return. This initial act of giving subtly activates a powerful psychological impulse known as reciprocity, the deeply ingrained human instinct to repay kindness or generosity with similar gestures. Once triggered, this subconscious desire profoundly increases compliance, cooperation, and willingness to agree to requests, even if recipients weren't initially inclined to do so. But why does reciprocity hold such extraordinary psychological power? The answer lies deep within evolutionary psychology. Throughout human history, survival depended heavily upon social cooperation and reciprocal exchanges. Communities thrived only if individuals reliably repaid generosity, assistance, or kindness consistently. Consequently, our brains evolved instinctively, associating receiving gifts, favors, or generosity with strong emotional pressure to reciprocate similarly. Even minor initial acts of giving automatically trigger intense subconscious feelings of indebtedness, profoundly influencing behaviors, decisions, and emotional responses automatically and powerfully. Consider an example involving charitable fundraising. Suppose volunteers attempt directly requesting donations openly, typically triggering limited success due to natural resistance or hesitation. Instead, imagine these volunteers skillfully employing reciprocity preloading. Initially, they provide individuals with free, small gifts genuinely, perhaps simple handmade bookmarks or candies, without immediately requesting donations. Subconsciously, recipients instinctively feel subtle indebtedness, significantly increasing willingness to donate generously afterward. Recipients willingly comply enthusiastically, genuinely believing they've freely chosen generosity. Unaware, subtle initial gifts profoundly influence subconscious emotional responses and behaviors positively. Similarly, reciprocity preloading profoundly transforms business or sales interactions. Imagine Jessica, a sales consultant hoping clients purchase high-value packages. Typically, openly persuading directly triggers resistance, hesitation, or suspicion. Instead, Jessica deliberately employs reciprocity preloading initially, providing clients valuable free consultations, personalized advice, or complementary resources genuinely without immediately requesting purchases. Subconsciously, clients instinctively experience subtle yet profound indebtedness, significantly increasing genuine willingness to purchase high-value packages afterward enthusiastically, subconsciously repaying initial generosity instinctively yet powerfully. Interestingly, numerous psychological studies consistently confirm reciprocity. Preloading dramatically increases subconscious motivation, behavioral compliance, emotional positivity, and cooperative behaviors compared to direct persuasion alone. Even subtle initial generosity, small gifts, thoughtful gestures, genuine assistance significantly transforms subconscious emotional responses automatically, dramatically enhancing subsequent cooperation, compliance, generosity, and genuine relationships effortlessly yet powerfully. Mastering reciprocity preloading requires emotional intelligence, genuine generosity, and strategic timing. Effective use involves deliberately providing genuine initial value naturally, small gifts, helpful advice, thoughtful assistance, without immediately requesting reciprocity overtly. Crucially, effective initial generosity consistently remains genuine, thoughtful, and emotionally authentic, subtly activating reciprocity instinctively yet powerfully without triggering conscious suspicion or discomfort subconsciously. However, effective reciprocity demands genuine emotional authenticity. Mechanically or manipulatively employing initial generosity quickly triggers subconscious suspicion, resistance, or discomfort. Effective reciprocity preloading genuinely and authentically prioritizes initial kindness, sincerely, naturally triggering reciprocity profoundly yet comfortably. Consistently practicing reciprocity preloading profoundly enhances interpersonal effectiveness, persuasive abilities, emotional intelligence, relationship quality, and genuine cooperative behaviors significantly. Subtle initial generosity dramatically transforms subconscious emotional reactions positively, effortlessly, enhancing cooperation, compliance, generosity, relationship intimacy, emotional connections, and genuine reciprocity instinctively and powerfully. Next time seeking genuine cooperation, compliance, or relationship harmony feels challenging, remember subtle initial generosity's extraordinary subconscious power. Rather than directly requesting or demanding actions, which often triggers resistance or hesitation, Strategically, provide genuine initial value naturally without immediate expectation overtly. Instantly, subconscious minds instinctively respond profoundly, yet subtly, significantly enhancing genuine reciprocity, cooperation, compliance, emotional positivity, and relationship intimacy, powerfully, yet effortlessly. Ultimately, mastering reciprocity. Preloading empowers subtle, yet profound subconscious influence, significantly enhancing persuasive abilities, emotional intelligence, interpersonal effectiveness, genuine relationship quality, and cooperative behaviors positively, naturally, comfortably, and powerfully. Inverted motivation. Imagine being told explicitly, "You absolutely must succeed." Surprisingly, this command often creates pressure, anxiety, or resistance, precisely the opposite emotional effect intended. Instead, what if someone said, "Don't worry, it's probably too challenging anyway. Maybe you're just not ready for it." Instantly, an intense motivation surges through you, determined to prove them wrong and achieve precisely because someone implied you couldn't. This fascinating psychological trick, where motivation dramatically increases when challenges or skepticism subtly suggest potential failure, is called inverted motivation. Inverted motivation involves deliberately and strategically framing goals, tasks, or challenges in terms of skepticism, doubt, or potential inability, rather than overtly encouraging success directly. Paradoxically, subtly implying doubt, potential failure, or skepticism often dramatically increases subconscious motivation, determination, resilience, and enthusiastic action, powerfully triggering a strong emotional drive to prove doubts or skepticism completely wrong, rather than openly encouraging success directly, which often unintentionally triggers resistance, anxiety, or performance pressure. Inverted motivation subtly leverages powerful subconscious instincts toward defiance, determination, and emotional resilience profoundly. But why does subtly implying skepticism or potential failure profoundly motivate subconscious minds powerfully? The answer lies deep within psychological reactance and human instinct toward autonomy and independence. Humans instinctively resist attempts at controlling behavior or decisions overtly, immediately triggering psychological reactance, emotional defiance, or subconscious resistance instinctively. However, subtly implying skepticism, doubt, or potential inability powerfully activates these subconscious instincts positively. Instead of passively accepting potential failure implied indirectly, subconscious minds instinctively respond defiantly, powerfully determined to prove skepticism completely wrong through enthusiastic motivation, resilience, and determined action profoundly. Consider a practical example involving athletic coaching scenarios. Suppose a coach explicitly instructs athletes, "You must win today. No excuses." Ironically, openly demanding success directly often triggers performance anxiety, pressure, or emotional resistance negatively. Instead, imagine the coach skillfully employing inverted motivation subtly. "Honestly, today's competition might be extremely challenging. Maybe you're just not fully prepared for this level yet." Immediately, subconscious minds instinctively perceive subtle skepticism powerfully, determined subconsciously to prove doubts completely wrong enthusiastically. Athletes dramatically increase subconscious motivation, emotional resilience, determination, and performance outcomes significantly, solely due to subtly implied skepticism, profoundly activating subconscious emotional instincts positively and powerfully. Similarly, inverted motivation profoundly transforms professional performance positively. Imagine Olivia hoping her sales team enthusiastically surpasses ambitious goals significantly. Previously, openly demanding increased performance often unintentionally generated emotional resistance, performance anxiety, or stubborn hesitation negatively. Instead, Olivia strategically employs inverted motivation conversationally. Honestly, these targets might just be unrealistic given current market conditions. Maybe they're simply beyond our capabilities right now. Instantly, subconscious minds instinctively perceive subtle skepticism powerfully, determined subconsciously to enthusiastically prove doubts completely wrong through dramatically increased motivation, emotional resilience, and enthusiastic performance significantly, subconsciously responding positively to subtle indirect skepticism profoundly. Interestingly, numerous psychological studies consistently confirm subtly implied skepticism dramatically increases subconscious motivation, emotional resilience, determined behaviors, and performance outcomes significantly compared to overtly demanding success directly. Even minor indirect suggestions of doubt or potential failure powerfully activate subconscious instincts profoundly, yet positively, dramatically transforming emotional reactions, motivations, determination, and behaviors effortlessly yet significantly. Mastering inverted motivation requires emotional intelligence, subtlety, and strategic timing. Effective use involves subtly yet authentically framing goals, tasks, or challenges indirectly through potential skepticism, doubt, or implied failure conversationally. Crucially, effective subtle skepticism consistently remains genuinely believable yet never overly discouraging, carefully balanced enough subconsciously activating determined emotional instincts powerfully yet positively, without unintentionally generating emotional discouragement negatively. However, effective subtle skepticism also demands genuine emotional authenticity. Mechanically or manipulatively employing skepticism quickly triggers subconscious suspicion, discomfort, or resistance negatively. Effective inverted motivation conversationally implies genuinely believable subtle doubts, authentically, naturally activating subconscious, determined instincts profoundly yet comfortably. Consistently practicing inverted motivation profoundly enhances motivational effectiveness, emotional intelligence, performance outcomes, interpersonal influence, and genuine emotional resilience significantly. Subtle conversational skepticism dramatically transforms subconscious emotional instincts profoundly yet positively, effortlessly enhancing motivation, determined behaviors, emotional resilience, and performance outcomes automatically and powerfully. Next time, dramatically increasing subconscious motivation, determination, or emotional resilience feels challenging, remember subtly implied skepticism's extraordinary psychological power. Rather than openly demanding success directly, which unintentionally triggers resistance or anxiety negatively, carefully imply subtle skepticism conversationally. Instantly, subconscious minds instinctively respond powerfully yet positively, dramatically, enhancing subconscious motivation, determination, resilience, emotional strength, performance outcomes, and genuine emotional connection effortlessly and powerfully. Ultimately, mastering inverted motivation empowers subtle yet profound subconscious motivational influence significantly, enhancing persuasive effectiveness, emotional intelligence, performance outcomes, relationship quality, emotional resilience, and genuine emotional connection positively, naturally, comfortably, and powerfully. Door in the face. Imagine someone approaches you with an outrageous request, something you immediately refuse because it's clearly unreasonable. Moments later, they return with a much smaller, more reasonable request, which you find yourself agreeing to almost instantly. Ever wondered why this happens? It's because you've just experienced a subtle yet powerful psychological trick known as door in the face. Door in the face is a clever psychological strategy involving first making a large, intentionally excessive request, anticipating rejection, followed swiftly by a smaller, more reasonable request, the one you actually wanted to achieve from the beginning. Remarkably, the initial exaggerated request subtly sets up a psychological environment that makes the subsequent, smaller request feel exceptionally reasonable and easy to accept, significantly increasing the chances of compliance. But why does this trick work so effectively? At the heart of door in the face lies the powerful psychological principle known as reciprocity and contrast. Humans instinctively strive to maintain social harmony by reciprocating favors, concessions, or gestures of goodwill. When you make a large request that someone rejects and then immediately follow up with a smaller, more reasonable request, your second offer feels like a concession, a compromise you've made for their benefit. This creates subconscious pressure for them to reciprocate by agreeing. Additionally, the stark contrast between the large initial request and the more modest follow-up makes the second request appear particularly appealing and manageable by comparison. Consider a practical scenario involving fundraising. Suppose Sarah volunteers at a local animal shelter, tasked with soliciting donations. Initially, she directly asks passersby to contribute $100, a request most people reject immediately because it seems excessive. However, she then quickly follows up with, "I completely understand. That's a lot. Would you perhaps consider donating just $10 instead?" Subconsciously, potential donors perceive the second, smaller request as reasonable and manageable compared to the original. They feel an instinctive urge to reciprocate Sarah's apparent concession by complying with the more reasonable ask. Donations significantly increase simply because the door-in-the-face technique subtly yet powerfully influenced their subconscious response. Similarly, door-in-the-face proves highly effective in professional negotiations. Imagine Tom negotiating salary increases with his employer. Initially, he deliberately proposes a notably ambitious raise, fully anticipating rejection. When his employer declines, Tom immediately responds by suggesting a more moderate raise, exactly what he genuinely hoped to achieve from the outset. The employer perceives Tom's second offer as a compromise, instinctively feeling compelled to reciprocate Tom's concession positively by accepting the more reasonable proposal. Tom achieves precisely the salary increase he originally desired solely through the strategic use of the door-in-the-face trick. Numerous psychological studies have repeatedly demonstrated door-in-the-face's remarkable effectiveness. In a classic experiment by social psychologist Robert Cialdini, researchers first asked participants to commit 2 hours per week volunteering for 2 years, an overwhelming request naturally rejected. Researchers then immediately asked the same participants simply to supervise a single 2-hour outing. Remarkably, compliance rates skyrocketed dramatically compared to when participants were only asked the smaller request without first hearing the exaggerated one. This vividly illustrates the powerful influence of the door-in-the-face approach in everyday situations. Mastering door-in-the-face requires emotional intelligence, subtlety, and skillful timing. Effective use involves deliberately and genuinely making an exaggerated initial request, fully anticipating and graciously accepting rejection without causing irritation or offense. Immediately following this, you skillfully introduce your real, smaller request as a reasonable, mutually beneficial compromise. Crucially, this smaller request consistently appears genuinely reasonable compared to the initially exaggerated ask, subtly yet powerfully increasing the other person's willingness to comply. However, successful use of door-in-the-face demands authenticity and sensitivity. Excessively exaggerated initial requests or overt manipulation quickly triggers suspicion or resentment. Instead, the trick relies on subtle psychological dynamics of reciprocity and contrast genuinely yet skillfully. Consistently practicing door in the face dramatically enhances persuasive influence, interpersonal effectiveness, negotiation outcomes, and emotional intelligence. Next time you seek compliance, cooperation, or agreement, remember the remarkable psychological power of door in the face. Rather than directly requesting exactly what you want, risking resistance or rejection, skillfully present an exaggerated initial request first. Instantly, your genuine subsequent request appears exceptionally reasonable and compelling, dramatically increasing compliance effortlessly. Ultimately, mastering door in the face empowers subtle yet profound persuasive influence, transforming everyday interactions positively and powerfully.